Go ahead and call the meeting to order.
Oh, don't we have to wait for the city clerk?
Oh, where is she?
Where is she?
We should just maybe forego a roll call.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Attorney can call roll.
We will, okay. Madam City Attorney, could you do the honors?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Harabedian.
Here.
Councilmember Del Mar.
Here.
Councilmember Capocha.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Arizmendi.
Present.
Mayor Goss.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Councilmember John Capocha will do our Pledge of Allegiance and invocation.
Everybody please rise. Place your right hand over your heart. And ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I have just a short Independence Day prayer, and this is a prayer that was given to our Congress a few years back. Eternal God, stir in our minds and stimulate our hearts with a high sense of patriotism on this upcoming 4th of July. May all that this day symbolizes renew our faith in our freedom, our devotion to democracy, and redouble our efforts to keep a government of the people, by the people, and for the people truly alive in our world. Grant that we may resolve on this great day to dedicate ourselves anew to the task of ushering in an era when goodwill shall live in the hearts of a free people, justice shall be the light to guide their feet, and peace shall be the goal of mankind. To the glory of your holy name and the good of our nation and of all mankind, amen.
Amen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Capocha. Madam City Attorney, could you please report out of closed session?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The council met in closed session this evening with its labor negotiator and received an update on the status of negotiations with the CEA union. Direction was provided, but no action was taken. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, folks, let's look at the agenda. And I'll take a motion for amendment or approval.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Mayor and City Council reports. Who'd like to go first?
I could.
Okay.
I have a nice one. So this is, I was asked to read this by Mrs. Barbara Klein. It's a letter that she had written to Southern California Edison and would like me to read this tonight to you. On June 20th, I, like hundreds of others, lost my electricity. Although my son-in-law brought his generator, the crisis still existed. Around 10 p.m., we noticed our neighbor's lights were on, but not mine. My daughter saw an Edison truck down the street and explained to the employee that I was recovering from a bad stroke. He then came to my home where he tried everything, but finally conceded it would be the next morning before the electricity would be restored. 20 minutes after he left, the lights came on and he pounded on the door. He came into the living room where we were all gathered and said he had to keep trying as he knew how much I needed electricity to be on. He then patted me on the shoulder and said he hoped I would be feeling better soon. He is such a credit to Southern California Edison, and because of his persistence and compassion, he is our hero. His name is Ralph Barkamont. Barbara Klein. First of all, thank you, Barbara, for giving us an inspiration. We're glad that you're feeling better. I also heard from Barbara that she called the police department and was told they didn't have any estimate on when her electricity would be on. So I would like our police department to please, when our elderly call and our residents call wondering the fate of the electricity, if they could assist them. It's easy to look this information up on the Edison webpage unless you don't have any electricity. Then it becomes really difficult to look this up. So again, Barbara, thank you for letting us have that inspiration, and we're so happy you're home and feeling better.
Nice.
I can go. Nothing personally to report, but we received word today publicly that our Assistant City Manager, Alyssa Cox, who's been with the city over 20 years, is going to be leaving us to bigger and better things and taking it.
Better?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on
Bigger.
depends on who you ask. Bigger for sure.
Doesn't get any
Yeah.
better than this.
But deputy city manager, the new deputy city manager over in Rancho Cucamonga, and I'll just say personally, I think it's a great opportunity for Ms. Cox, and we'll miss her here, and there'll be more farewells. But I just wanted to say that it's been really a pleasure working with you, and it's a huge loss to our city. But I think personally and professionally, it'll be a great opportunity for you.
Okay, I just want to say that I attended the Historical Society ravioli and chicken dinner, and it was wonderful. This is, I think, the 4th year now that they've had it, I think. So, great time was had by all, and I'm looking forward to it again next year. That's it.
Unfortunately, I missed the ravioli dinner this year, but I heard it was a great event. I don't remember if it was before the last council meeting, but the Friends of the Library had their installation of their officers, and that was a really nice event too, and recognizing the fabulous work that the group has done and to welcome board members that are continuing and also some new ones that have just started getting involved into Friends, so it's great to see that. One other note, and I'll leave it to maybe the mayor if he wants to expand on it a little bit more, but the mayor and I met with Assemblyman Chris Holden last week, and it gave us opportunity to have a sit-down, one-on-one, well, 4-on-2 with him, and Madam City Manager, Assistant Manager joined us in that meeting also, just to talk about the issues that are affecting us here in Sierra Madre, and how we, as a city, could use the support of Assemblyman and vice versa. Some of the work the Assemblyman is working on that he'd like to see the support of the city. A few highlights on that is all our EWIMP work and the MS4, and it looks like the Assemblyman has heard from other cities locally that this is a concern, so he has is it a resolution, I believe? Was it in form of a resolution?
Correct.
Yeah. That he's putting forward in recognizing that cities where we are doing our best to adhere to the EWIMP and our intent is there, but at the end of the day, we don't have the funding for it. So there's unfunded mandates. And one thing he highlighted, though, is that because the money is not going through the state directly, that the state has little jurisdiction over that. The money's coming straight from the feds to the board, the ARB, correct? And so we'd like to just see how he can, we'll see what he can do with that resolution, see if there's any work that he can do at that end. But we're thinking the approach really needs to be multifaceted, working with our congressional representatives and seeing how we can bring the EPA into that. A couple of things that we notice concern is the effects of AB 109 and Prop 47 and the increased spike of burglaries that we had experienced, and what are the things that the Assembly can look at, or I should say the state legislature can look at. We didn't get much of an answer to that one, aside from our hands are kind of tied on that. But he recognized it is an issue, and some of the remedies are a little bit more long-term than we'd like to see, because obviously we're seeing the effects immediately. We talked a little bit about group living, a little bit about the next phase for RDA or redevelopment dollars and what they're trying to do at the state level. And then we talked a little bit about the state park bond that's going to be proposed, and a little bit about the county park bond. I think that's captured that, but leave it up to the mayor to see if there's anything else he wants to expand on that meeting.
Very thorough job. I'll just add a couple remarks. First, I wanted to tell everyone I was at that ravioli and chicken dinner as well. I got in a little late, and I still can't figure out whether the chicken or the ravioli was better or not. They were both good, but it was a nice time, and hats off to the Sierra Madre Historical Preservation Society. They're absolutely a crucial part of this town. It's amazing people do some amazing things with that group. Also, I wanted to tell everyone that just like in the previous 2 years, Village Vine Online will be doing a live webcast of our 4th of July parade. Go to villagevine.org, O-R-G, and you'll find a link for the live event. It'll begin at the time the parade begins, which I believe is always at 10 a.m., isn't that correct? And there will be commentary, same people who did it last year, Rich Johnson and Catherine Addy, and it'll be taped. So after the event, if you want to go back and take a look at it, tell people all over the world, wherever they may be, if they want to see our parade, it'll be there. And also, I just wanted to say to Assistant City Manager Alyssa Cox that I'm really happy for you. It's a big loss for us, but I'm really happy for you, and congratulations. To follow up on what Mayor Pro Tem Arizmendi was saying, I really want to comment on the NPDES issue. I took a little bit of, we've all been kind of depressed about that issue because we didn't really feel like, leaders above us and maybe laterally quite got it. And it seems to me that Assemblyman Holden gets it, and I'm very heartened by that. I think he's a pretty effective guy up there, and I see some things happening there. One of the things we talked about is putting together some kind of meeting involving the people at different levels of government who are involved in this, getting all the stakeholders at one table, somewhere in some venue, sometime soon, here in the San Gabriel Valley, where we can kind of get all these issues out on the table and see if we can make some adjustments and where things are headed. So I thought that was, and he's going to take the lead on that, and I'm very, very pleased to hear that. So I think that's really good news. I wasn't as excited to hear his counsel to us on issues having to do with crime related to AB 109, Prop 47. Kind of got the impression from him that that's pretty much baked into state governance right now, and owing to all the prison overpopulation issues. There's some talk, I guess, up in Sacramento about sending increased resources to local police departments and possibly county jails. But he really had no specifics on that. He couldn't really cite any legislation that was pending on that right now. But on all, I thought it was a really productive meeting, and I was really pleased that he would take the time. I think we spent about an hour and 15 minutes with him, so that's really good. Anyway, that's the end of my report. Okay. Now we're going to move on to public comment on non-agenda items. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Charlie Kissinger, 677 Brookside. I spent the better part of 2 years coming down and railing about trash cans. So I'm here to say, even though I'm not sure the pros and cons of the way it's being distributed to the MRF, I'm much happier not moving lots more trash cans. Everybody in the canyon seems to have a lot less trash cans they're putting out. Some people haven't quite figured out that they can put all of it into one or two yet, but it has definitely made it easier, and the bears are just temporarily more confused.
Kissinger.
Good evening, Mayor Goss and City Council members. I am one of your library trustees, Glenn Putnam, from 630 Oak Crest Drive, Sierra Madre. And I am here to present all of the activities that are going on at our Sierra Madre Public Library during the months of July and August, plus the remainder of June. There's a lot of activity going on with One Book, One City, the always popular summer reading program, and of course our stuffed animal sleepover, which has become a tradition. For the One Book, One City, the One Book, One City Committee has selected The Natural by Bernard Malamud as this year's One Book, One City selection. The book was published in 1952 as a witty yet biting novel, thought by many to be one of the very best baseball books ever written. Since baseball was the selected theme for One Book, One City, guess what? We're going to have several baseball activities that have been planned. And they are, first is that the committee is hiding plastic baseballs anywhere around town And if somebody finds one, they will be numbered, and you return them back to the library, and the library will give you some cash for the used book sales. So it's used book sale money, not real cash. It'll be a different color of money. And then on July 8th at 8 p.m., The Natural, the movie which is starring Robert Redford in Memorial Park, and we are going to have it complete with hot dogs and ice cream food trucks. Now, I don't know if they're going to have Dodger dogs, but they will have hot dogs and ice cream there. Then on Saturday, July 16th at 9 a.m., we're going to have a tour of Dodger Stadium. That is going to be a facilitated and walk-through type of tour of Dodger Stadium. Hopefully we'll be able to get into some of the neater parts of Dodger Stadium and get an insider's view of it. The price for this is $45 for adults and $35 for seniors and for teenagers. Then 2 days later, on, 3 days later, on Tuesday, July 19th at 7 p.m., they're going to have Mark Landgill, who is the Dodger team historian, look back at the 67 years of Vince Scully's career. And that is an amazing record in itself, 67 years with the same club. Then on July 21st at 11 a.m., we will have the Third Thursday Book Club, and they will be discussing The Natural. And then lastly, on July 25th at 7 p.m., Nick Roman of KPCC's All Things Considered discusses our national pastime in some amount of depth. And it will be at this July 25th get-together that the winners of the finding the most baseballs and returning them back, we will have a drawing, and they will be able to win a grand prize of some variety. So that is One Book, One City. And then this next one, I would like for you to take out your calendars and mark it on down, because the summer reading program is already up and running, and it started on June 11th. And it's open to children, teens, and adults. But join today, because it doesn't matter how often you read, it is how much you're reading and the quality of reading that you're getting in. Join today. The more you read, the better, and the more you read, the better the prizes are that you will receive as you earn different levels. In between books, when you have a little downtime, may we suggest to fill the void and attendance at one or more of our summer events beginning tomorrow, June 29th, at 3 p.m. over at the library, with a robotics workshop that they are going to be having from 3 until 6, and they will all be building a robot during the course of it. Then on July 6th at 3 p.m., we are going to have Fire and Ice Mad Science Show. It's a foggy, dry ice storm, Egbert the Egg, and even a special mad science burp portion will amaze children as they learn about chemical reactions. Then on July 11th at 10 a.m., we have Up, and Away. This mad science special event introduces children to the principles of air and pressure with flying toilet paper, fire, and hot air balloons. And then on July 2nd we will have the stuffed animal sleepover. And that is where the children will bring in their favorite stuffed animal, drop it off at the library, and then who knows what will happen during the course of the evening with them as they will proceed and do various mischievous types of things. Then on July 23rd at 10 a.m., we will have our annual breakfast and we will review exactly what happened the night before as the animals had their night together. And the children will pick up their furry friends after an evening of antics and join them for breakfast and a slideshow with your family. Then July 25th at 10 a.m., we have Bubble Mania once again with the person that will put bubbles in all different shapes and everything over the people. And then lastly, on August 1st, we have the Olympic puppet show. The Animal Olympics are in town. Watch the drama unfold and pick who you'd like to see win the gold medal. As you can see, we've got a busy month coming up, and I would certainly hope that each of you could attend, and we would like to invite you to attend and be with us. And I have some brochures for you that we can hand out to everyone so that you can put this on your refrigerator and keep it there and put it on the calendar. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Trustee Putman. I'm really excited about the natural in the park. That's going to be a great event.
You bet.
Yeah, it's going to be a great event.
If you haven't seen the movie, it's very, very good.
Great movie.
It's a very good movie.
So when do the plastic baseballs get distributed? When can people start looking for those?
It is during the month of July, so on July 1st,
Okay.
on Friday, I do believe that they will have them out and about.
Are there directions on the balls? Like, what if someone finds it? Will they know, bring this to the library?
It's going to be a plastic ball. It's going to be in a baseball shape. If they find it, it will have a note on it, I believe, that is going to say, bring it here to the library to
Okay.
redeem it for whatever. Let me see. Find a baseball. The baseballs are hidden throughout Sierra Madre, including local merchants, in the parks, in Kirstein Court, just about anywhere. Find a baseball, bring it to the library. When small treasures become eligible for a drawing, an exciting final treasure at the end of July, which will be on July 25th. The plastic balls are numbered and concealed at spots around Sierra Madre with a flyer explaining the game. Baseballs go back into circulation, and you can enter as many times as you want. Keep searching throughout July to increase your chances.
Okay, great.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have, any other public comment? Next, we have a report from San Gabriel Valley Mosquito and Vector Control Officer. Jason, I should get my reading glasses on here. Jason Farnd,
That's right.
and I believe I see Dr. Janice Nelson with you as well.
Yeah, I'm in good company here today. So thank you very much. My name is Jason Farnett. I'm the Public Information Officer for the San Gabriel Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District. And I'm here today just to give you a quick overview of what we have going on throughout the city and San Gabriel Valley in terms of vector control and give you a quick update. I also want to say that the city's information on the website is very well done. I want to thank you all very much for supporting us in that. It's great information and it's put together really well on the website. So thank you very, very much. It really helps when the city is supporting in such a good way. I want to start with I actually start every presentation with this slide because if you remember nothing else of what I say here tonight, remember this, that mosquitoes grow in water. They spend 3 out of the 4 stages of their life cycle in water. And so here are some examples of the types of water sources that you would find around your house or around the neighborhood that might be growing mosquitoes. And if we could just get rid of these sources by eliminating the standing water, we can greatly reduce the population of mosquitoes throughout the city. I'm going to talk about 2 things today. The first one is West Nile virus, which is an endemic mosquito-borne disease here in California, and then also an invasive mosquito species we call invasive Aedes. So there's 2 different types of mosquitoes that are transmitting diseases right now. The first one is our common Culex mosquito, and they're the most populous mosquito in our area, and they transmit West Nile virus. We also have invasive Aedes mosquitoes, which are 3 different species of mosquitoes, all belonging to the same genus, the Aedes genus, and they all have similar characteristics. I'll get into more detail in just a second, but they transmit viruses like dengue, chikungunya, and everybody's heard about Zika lately in the news. So I'll touch base on that a little bit, but if you have any more questions specifically about Zika, I'm happy to answer them. So for West Nile virus, we've had a few years of really high numbers. And West Nile virus, like I said, is endemic in California. It never goes away. It's always circulating through our bird population. And usually we have spikes of high years, and then it kind of tapers down for a few years, and we have a 4-year or so trend. But the last couple of years, we've had high numbers every year. So it's made it kind of unpredictable. So in 2014, there were 798 human cases. These are reported human cases in the state of California, and that resulted in 29 deaths. Here in San Gabriel Valley, there were 24 human cases, resulting in 2 deaths. Then last year, in 2015, there were 570 human cases, which were a little bit less, but it resulted in 45 human deaths statewide. 22 of those deaths were right here in Los Angeles County. So we've had 2 really high years. The fact that we're in a drought and we've had really warm, short winters has contributed to a high mosquito population. And so we have no reason to expect these numbers to go down at all this year. We're expecting another high year for West Nile virus. So it's more important than ever to prevent mosquito bites and to lower the mosquito population. So West Nile virus is a virus that mainly affects birds. The birds are what's called the reservoir for the virus. Birds carry the virus, and some of them die, but some of them don't. And what happens is mosquitoes bite the birds, they contract the virus, and then they spread that virus to other birds. And when the population of infected birds and the population of infected mosquitoes reach a certain point, then the virus spills over to incidental hosts, which are humans and horses and some other animals as well. That's why West Nile virus seems like it's a seasonal virus, and we might only hear about it every couple of years or definitely only during the summer, but it's always circulating between the mosquitoes and the birds. Fortunately for horses, there's a vaccine, but for humans, there's no vaccine or no treatment. So bite prevention is key. So the best way to prevent mosquito bites is by purchasing and using mosquito repellent. So a good mosquito repellent with DEET as an active ingredient, or picaridin, which is a good natural alternative. Finding one that you like and that you can use on a regular basis, and wearing it really during the summer, especially during the hours of dusk and dawn when the mosquitoes that transmit West Nile virus are most active. But there's a couple other ways you can protect yourself. Also, by wearing long sleeves and long pants when mosquitoes are active. And I always feel bad telling people in Southern California to wear long sleeves and long pants when it's 100 degrees outside. But usually in the evenings when it's cooled down and you're working out in the yard or you're barbecuing or spending time with family, it's a good idea to have on some loose-fitting long clothing. Also, check the screens on your windows and doors for any holes or tears. It's important to keep screens in good repair and tightly fitted around the windows and doors so that way the mosquitoes can't get in the evening or when you're sleeping. And most importantly, like I mentioned before, it's finding and eliminating that standing water by dumping and draining standing water around your property. So the second thing I wanted to update everyone on is the invasive Aedes mosquitoes. So in 2011, we found the Asian tiger mosquito, or Aedes aegypti, Aedes albopictus in the city of El Monte. And in the last 5 years, it's expanded steadily throughout San Gabriel Valley, and I'll show you a map in just a minute. But these mosquitoes are very different from our common mosquitoes. And so they're posing a difficult challenge in management, and they bring a whole new host of viruses that we've never had to worry about, those I mentioned before, like dengue, chikungunya, and Zika. So the things that make these mosquitoes different, first of all, they bite aggressively during the day. And that's something people here in California aren't used to worrying about. We're not used to having to put on mosquito repellent or worry about mosquito bites while we're playing with our kids in the park or where we're laying out by the pool. These mosquitoes are the reason why a lot of pools and patios in places like Florida are completely screened in. So once these mosquitoes become established, they greatly change the way that we use outdoor spaces. The city of Duarte up in Fish Canyon and along the foothills, they've been hit really hard the last couple of years. So if you're interested in reaching out and finding how the city, what kinds of phone calls or what kind of support the city needed from residents, they're a good resource because they have a lot of these types of mosquitoes there, and their residents call very frequently about day-biting mosquitoes. The second thing that makes these mosquitoes different is that they bite multiple hosts. And this is significant for two reasons. One is because it makes these mosquitoes much more efficient at transmitting diseases. Only female mosquitoes bite. And the reason they bite is because they need protein from the blood meal to develop eggs. And so when the female is ready to produce eggs, it will bite, collect a blood meal, and in our common mosquitoes here in California, that mosquito will bite one host for that one blood meal. They'll lay their eggs, and then that cycle will repeat. And once they contract West Nile virus or another mosquito-borne disease, every time they're ready for an egg cycle and they bite someone, they have an opportunity to transmit that disease. So typical mosquito might lay 3 or 4 broods before they die. And so they have 2 or 3 opportunities to transmit a disease. This type of mosquito, however, they'll bite more than one host per blood meal. So if they land on you and they're biting you and you disturb them in any way, they have no problem flying away. They'll circle around and come back to you and bite you somewhere else, or they might go and bite someone else. So they could bite multiple hosts per blood meal, which means they have the opportunity to transmit those diseases a lot more frequently than our common mosquitoes. The other reason this is significant is because even when there's no diseases being circulated by these mosquitoes, one mosquito could be responsible for several mosquito bites. So where our common mosquitoes prefer to bite birds and smaller mammals, and they only bite one host per blood meal, if we can reduce the population of mosquitoes to a manageable level, the normal residents don't even realize that they're there because they're not getting bitten. We reduce their population enough to where humans don't notice them. These mosquitoes, however, prefer human hosts, and they bite aggressively, and so you literally have to get rid of every single mosquito in your area to not know that they're there. One mosquito can be responsible for a lot of mosquito bites and or a lot of damage. The other thing that's significant about these mosquitoes is that they're container breeders. So they've evolved to live closely with humans. They prefer life around humans. They can live indoors and outdoors. And what's different from our common mosquitoes, which prefer larger natural bodies of standing water, these mosquitoes prefer very small, usually man-made containers that are found in all of our backyards. They lay their eggs on the inside rim of the containers. They lay their eggs one at a time in several or 100 different places, and those eggs can lay dormant for several months up to a year, just waiting for the right conditions to hatch. So that means that these eggs are very difficult to find, and even when we find them and eliminate their breeding sources, there's other eggs that are still out there waiting to hatch. So the best way to eliminate these mosquitoes is to locate those breeding sources of standing water, those containers, and get rid of them. And what we found over the last couple of years while we've been battling these mosquitoes and trying to slow down their infestation is that our organization alone can't manage the population of mosquitoes because their sources are so cryptic. So here is the infestation area as of now. And Sierra Madre, and I'm not sure if this is the exact spot, but I know that there has been one count of invasive Aedes found within the city. And so probably by the end of the summer, you may start feeling some of those day-biting mosquitoes. You may start seeing more. But at the expansion rate that they've been going at, we expect the entire San Gabriel Valley to be infested by the end of this year, if not by the end of next year for sure. So this is what's going to be important. Here's the Asian tiger mosquito. It's a very small black and white mosquito. If you see a mosquito like this, or you feel mosquitoes biting during the day, it's really important that you take action, search your property, and eliminate sources. Because as the mosquito expands, if we expect to slow down the mosquito, or if you want to keep them out of the city, we need to make sure that they have as little opportunity as possible to establish themselves and find a conducive habitat. So here are some examples of things that are in all of our backyards. The first one is the bromeliads up here. These plants naturally hold water, and they make a perfect environment for these types of mosquitoes. So when we first had this issue, we just encouraged people to keep an eye on their bromeliads, but these particular plants have been such a good source for breeding mosquitoes that we're asking residents now just to rip them up altogether, remove them from their landscape. Things like old tires and debris that's found around the home are also things that need to be cleaned up. The saucers that collect water underneath flower pots, that holds just enough water for these mosquitoes to grow. And here's an example of something that could be in the house that are breeding mosquitoes, any kind of plants that sit in water. The Asian tiger mosquito was originally brought here to the United States on the stalks of these bamboo right here. The mosquito laid the eggs on the stalks of the actual plant themselves. These plants were shipped here to the United States. They were shipped dry. They were then sold here. People bought them, went home, threw them in water. It activated those eggs, and that's how the local infestation started. So the most dramatic example I can share with you is this. This is a bottle cap, just a regular water bottle cap that we found in someone's backyard. They had a recycling trash can right here, and some of the bottle caps spilled over. They filled with sprinkler water, and there are 2 mosquito larvae swimming right there. So as you can see, it's very difficult for our specialists on the ground and the people that are inspecting properties to go out and find every single bottle cap in every single person's backyard. It's almost impossible, and I really don't think that your residents want us traipsing through their backyard as often as it would take to really solve this problem. So it's really important that I educate the community the best I can, and that the community encourages residents to share the responsibility and take it upon themselves to inspect their property on a regular basis and remove these sources that are conducive to breeding mosquitoes. So one of the things that we've been finding more and more lately is mosquitoes breeding in rain barrels. There's been a huge influx of rain barrels that have been distributed throughout San Gabriel Valley. I know a lot of cities have even held free rain barrel events. I know that I have been at events where nearly 10,000 rain barrels have been given out throughout the San Gabriel Valley, and most of the rain barrels we come across are breeding mosquitoes. This doesn't even take into consideration all of the homemade rain collection devices where people are just collecting rain in buckets and trash cans around their house. So in no way do we want to discourage people from collecting rainwater and contributing to drought relief, but it's really important that if the city especially encourages rain collection, or I know a lot of cities are considering new mandates that require rain collection, bioswales, and rain barrels built onto new properties, it's important that we take mosquitoes into consideration and public health. So we have a lot of information on our website, and we distribute a lot of information on how to manage your rain barrel. Not one rain barrel that I've ever seen, and I've done a lot of research, whether they're the ones that are sold at Home Depot or Osh, or the ones that people are making by themselves, are completely mosquito-proof. And so every single rain barrel that I find needs some kind of modification, and they all need constant upkeep. So that's an important message for us right now. So that's what we're dealing with mosquitoes. I was asked to briefly mention bees, because bees are something that we don't take care of at the district. We don't have a specific service for bees, but we do get a lot of phone calls about bees. And the reason that our district doesn't specifically take care of bees is because Mainly, we take care of things that transmit diseases or that are a severe nuisance. And bees typically aren't a severe public health risk, but they are scary to people, especially when they show up in front yards or on school campuses. But the majority of the calls we get for bees are for swarming bees. And this is what a bee swarm looks like. And basically what happens is when a beehive gets too big, half of them break off. The queen takes half of them and they go and look for a new home. And so while they're out searching for the new home, when the queen gets tired, she'll rest and the bees will surround her to protect her. But they don't have any hive to protect. And so two things with this type of beehive. One is that they're not aggressive because they're technically not protecting anything. And second is they're only resting. So within 24 to 48 hours, they'll move on. So most of the bee calls we get, we encourage people just to stay away from them, leave them alone for a day or two, and they'll move on, and that's usually what happens. When bees are inside the home, that's when there's a problem. So we can educate people on how to keep bees out of your home and how to prevent them from establishing there in the first place. But if any bees have actually built hives inside the house, we encourage residents to contract private pest control that can safely move the bees from one place to another. Bees are in severe decline with colony collapse. The population of bees in Los Angeles County has severely declined, and so we don't want to contribute to that in any way. So we really try to make sure that people aren't exterminating the bees, that they hire someone that can responsibly move them somewhere else. And so I know I talked probably fairly quickly, and I have a lot of information in a small amount of time. So if you have any other questions, feel free to give me a call or go on our website. We also encourage everybody to follow us on social media. We're on both Twitter and Facebook. And if there's any questions from the council, I'd be happy to take them now.
First, I want to thank you for coming. We probably should hear from you more often. It sounds like a pretty serious issue. Your colleague, Dr. Nelson, happens to be my neighbor. I've talked with her about these issues over the last year, so I'm aware of them. Are you recommending that there's some kind of pesticide that's applicable in these cases that might suffice to help in the situation, or is it just basically getting rid of the water source?
Getting rid of the water source is the best long term. Pesticide use is actually a very small part of our program. And with this particular mosquito with the invasive Aedes, it's a lot less effective than it is with some of our other mosquitoes, and our common mosquitoes especially. So really what it is just changing our habits as residents and not providing places where these mosquitoes can lay their eggs and grow. That's really the best long-term solution. If we come out and a home is really inundated with mosquitoes, we might apply pesticides, but it's only going to provide a very short-term fix. I'm talking maybe a couple of days to a week at most before the new mosquitoes start hatching out. Because most of the pesticides that we use are larvicides that kill the immature mosquitoes before they turn into adults, and because the way that these eggs work and they don't hatch all at the same time and they can remain dormant for so long, the larvicides are very inconsistent. And so the much more reliable way and long-term, as well as least expensive and best for the environment, is just to remove the water.
Do we know that they are transmitting dengue fever and Zika now in the San Gabriel Valley?
Yeah, so there are two mosquito species that are capable of transmitting the disease, the Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus, both of which are here in LA County, and both of them are capable of transmitting those diseases. However, none of the local mosquitoes now are transmitting the disease, which means, and this is the case with Zika too, and I meant to mention, I apologize, with Zika virus specifically, there's no local transmission in the United States, and that's an important thing to remember. So unless you're traveling outside of the country, there's virtually zero threat for you right now today. Now, when you listen to the news and you start to hear about local transmission, that's when you want to really become aware and find out if that how close that local transmission is. Unfortunately for us, all of that area in red is susceptible to local transmission. So if someone were to travel outside of the country, contract one of these diseases, and come home, get bit with by one of our local mosquitoes, they could start a local epidemic.
Question. What are you doing to get the information into the hands of just everyday public? Because, I mean, it's kind of shocking what I heard here. I didn't realize any of this, especially since we've been on a conservation binge here and encouraging people to capture their water. And the other question is, are you working with the water agencies that are offering these rebates for the water capture tanks to advise them on how they should be maintained and set up?
Yeah, so I'll answer your questions kind of backwards. We are working with the water districts, and we've gone to several water forums to talk about these issues. Also, we have worked with, there's a few different companies or organizations that kind of act as a middleman that distribute these rain barrels and help facilitate the rebate from the state, which make it the free rain barrel. And so we're, Ecotech is one of those, probably the most prominent in this area. We're working directly with them. I've been out to all of their free events talking specifically one-on-one with these residents as they get the rain barrels. As a district as a whole, we have a surveillance team specifically dedicated to the Asian tiger mosquito and invasive Aedes that are going door to door and distributing information and training residents on a one-on-one basis. That's an extremely slow and laborious way to do it, but it is extremely effective. But on a wider scale, it's just kind of throwing as much information out in as many different ways as possible. So both through social media and our website and as many community events that I can get out to. So I'm free to do community events. If you ever think you have an event where this information would be valuable, give me a call and I can come out and pass out information.
Is it possible for you to, I have your Facebook site linked or liked, so I get, it's in my feed. And that would be great if we could get more people to do that. Is it possible for you to sponsor that in the Sierra Madre or through Facebook? That way it goes across thousands of people's feeds with fairly low cost.
Right, yeah, and we've been doing a lot more of that lately. We've been concentrating in areas where the infestation already is. And so what will be next is those peripheral areas will be kind of preparing people. Unfortunately, until people don't really start to listen and understand the depth of the problem until they start getting these severe bites during the day. And then they go, what's going on here? And then they really start to listen and pay attention. So it's just kind of finding that balance of getting people prepared, but at the same time making sure they understand how important it is. But yeah, we do actually push quite a bit through social media directly at Sierra Madre and some of our other communities that are expecting invasive Aedes.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, first of all, thank you so much for coming out and giving us this information. I'll probably have nightmares tonight, but that's okay. So we don't have the infestation right now, right? So, but it's approaching.
Yeah, we found one sample of invasive Aedes somewhere at a property. We got a service call. We came out. We found them on that property. Now that doesn't mean that they're not here. It just means that documented, we haven't actually physically found them.
So we should be looking for them.
Yes. Yeah.
So is this new? Is this kind of a new mosquito? You know, I grew up in the East and lived in the Midwest, and we had mosquitoes all the time, and we didn't have these diseases going back and forth. You just sprayed and...
Yeah, it's
got big
fairly,
bites.
these mosquitoes have been a fairly common part in Florida and in Texas, some parts of the South. But very new here in California.
Okay.
2011 was the first incidence that's been expanding in LA County, but we're also been expanding in Central and Northern California in pockets as well.
Okay, any more questions? Thank you very much for coming tonight. Very,
welcome.
very,
My
very good
pleasure.
information.
And you'll keep us informed, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to get an update from Public Works Director Inman regarding water conservation and the city's water quality report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. For your water supply report for the month of June and a report on our water conservation efforts. This will give you a snapshot of the last few months. March through May, we were right up there where our percentage was supposed to be according to the state. June, not so much. We're going back down in terms of our percentage of conservation. I think we can attribute to some of this to the fact that March through May of 2013 were high water use months. So that made it easier for us this year to meet that goal. As you know, as we discussed at our last meeting, the state has provided a new conservation order requiring the local agencies to develop their own self-determined conservation goals. And as was adopted at the last council meeting, we've adopted a 30% conservation goal, continuing phase 3 along with the building moratorium. That information was submitted to the State Water Resources Control Board. We received a response that they had received that, and 2 days later they called us up and asked for additional information. That has been provided to them, and we're awaiting comments to see if there are any further concerns from the state. But as of right now, we believe we are in compliance with their orders. In terms of the status of our aquifer, as you can see, as of yesterday, the water level has dropped about almost 9 feet from where it was in May. Some of that can be attributed to the normal fluctuation in water service with wells going on and off. But if that level of water level decline continues at that rate, within 7 months we would be back at the October 9th, 2013 level where we would have to shut the wells off. So that underlines the seriousness of the situation in a way. But we will be going back to spreading the imported water as of July 1st with the start of the new fiscal year. So we should see this decline stop or reverse itself. One of the things that I mentioned in my staff report at the last council meeting was concerns that we will have over the water chemistry as we continue to put the imported water into the ground. This chart will show you what we mean by that, total dissolved solids, TDS or salts. The baseline for our water before we started importing was 265 parts of TDS and 15 parts of sulfate. The basin plan set up by the regional board is 450 and 100. The water we're putting in is considerably higher than the basin plan water, and as of the last test that we had done of the water, you can see that the levels of TDS has come up considerably, but we are not approaching the basin plan levels. Should we get close to the basin plan levels, we may be directed to stop spreading the imported water. In terms of distribution system leakage, we're continuing to deal with quite a lot of leaks. We're not quite done with June yet, of course, and we've already dealt with 46 leaks. So that does show an increase over the last few months. So the water staff is keeping very busy, and we're in the process of buying out LA County's supply of repair clamps. There's a couple of changes that I wanted to remind the community of. First of all, there is a scheduled rate increase for both the volumetric rate, our tiers will be increasing July 1st, as well as the bi-monthly meter charge. People will see an increase in their water bills and want them just to be forewarned about that. And then, per the City Council resolution that was adopted recently, 16-23, the new penalty rate for water used in excess of assigned conservation goals is now 2 times the Tier 4 rate, or $10.72 per unit. This will apply to all water consumed after June 14th for one billing cycle of the town west of Baldwin, or water consumed after July 12th for those properties east of Baldwin. And with that, I'd be happy to address any questions that you have.
Questions? Hearing none. I think we're good. Thank you, Director Inman. Okay, let's move on to the consent calendar.
Mayor, members of the City Council, there are 4 items on your consent calendar. Item 1A is adoption of Resolution 1641, approving our Register of Demands. 1B is consideration of Resolution 1642, designating a voter delegate and alternate for the 2016 League of California Cities Conference and Business Meeting, which is in Long Beach this year. The recommendation is that the council designate Councilmember Capocha as the delegate and Councilmember Del Mar as the alternate. Those are the 2 council members that are currently serving as your delegate and alternate to the League of California Cities. At item 1C is Resolution 16-43, acceptance of the July 2015 actuarial report and pre-funding schedule for fiscal year 15-16 and 16-17. The recommendation is that the council approve the resolution accepting the actuarial report and pre-funding schedule and appropriate from fund balance or reserves $100,000 to pay for the CalPERS California Employers Retiree Benefit Trust Fund. At item 1D is the City Council appointment to Collaborate Pasadena. This is essentially switching out Mayor Pro Tem Arizmendi with Councilmember Capocha due to a scheduling conflict. That concludes staff's presentation. We'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
I do have a question about the OPEB valuation report. Can you just explain a little bit why all of a sudden they are,
Why we owe again?
$621,000 liability now that we did not know about before?
Good evening. Actually, GASB 65 provided for actuarial valuations of the OPEB contribution. However, just this March, there was an exemption on GASB 65 not to reflect or perform the actuarial value on the implicit subsidy rate. This March, the exemption was removed, so now we're required to present that information on our actuarial valuation and also as part of our financial report.
Can you explain the implicit subsidy?
The implicit subsidy rate is really, as retirees retire, let's say it's retire at 60 years of age, we're paying the premium for this, the same as an active employee, let's say a 30-year-old. So the difference, if they were to obtain their own plan, they would be paying a higher rate. So the implicit subsidy rate is really reflects the difference between what we actually subsidize with active employee premiums for the retirees.
So, well, the retirees, we give them, we see it every month on our warrants there that we're paying them, but you're saying that
We'll pay the premium that's the same for active employees. And
why
actually,
is this unfunded then? I mean, that's what we pay them. I mean, we're supposed to pay them more?
according to GASB 65, active employees, by having retirees pay the same premium as active employees, we're in a sense subsidizing the retiree premiums with the active employees. Because if they had their own plan, they would be paying higher rates. So the difference between that and the subsidy is what they compute the actuarial valuation and the liability. But in all honesty, when you look at the numbers, I don't see it happening that we actually are paying a different rate for retirees than for active employees. So the actual payment of that subsidy is probably going to continue to be paid with active employees. But we're required not to disclose that liability.
So what we're going to do now is we need to make an additional contribution of $99,000 a year to satisfy this?
It's not required to pre-fund OPEB, the trust. What's required is for us to actually perform the actuarial and record and disclose this in our financial report. But council has had the policy to pre-fund this OPEB retiree benefit. Therefore, we're recommending that we continue pre-funding and with the same policy and at least pre-fund the current amount due.
Well, but we were, you know, if I'm just looking at the chart on, what page is this? Page 2 of 3. Was it our previous for the explicit was 49,000? And, you know, as a result of what we had been paying, we are actually overfunded.
Correct.
And now with this new rule that we have to fund the implicit, we are now underfunded. So as a result, we're going to make an annual required contribution of $99,000 for that implicit underfunding, right?
Correct.
But I think the hesitation is staff would not use the word required because there is no legal requirement to fund this. But if the council wants to continue on the payment schedule we've been, so that we don't end up with a larger liability in the future, it makes sense to make payments as we go along.
What's bothering me about this is that last year, we were on a path where we had nothing to worry about because we had overfunded. And now with this accounting rule,
Correct.
Yes.
so what I'm looking for is the reality of it. Were we last year on a road to increasing the liability for future generations? Or were we, what I thought we were, was overfunded and we were just fine as long as we kept making the payments, there would be no additional problem in the future.
True, and that's what,
The story is
The
different.
target has been moved. You're correct.
But the target has been, but this is a rule written on a piece of paper.
The reporting of it in our financial statements is the requirement,
So why would we make an extra payment now?
so that we can continue on the path we've been on to put money into the trust fund, so when this eventually comes due, the money's available to pay for it, and future councils aren't pulling it out of the general fund to pay it when it's due in the
Do
future.
you guys see the struggle with this the way I'm struggling? Because last year we were good, and now we're not because somebody wrote something on a piece of paper.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, is I understand what the GASB 45
65.
is supposed to do. I mean, now it's a disclosure, we have to actually count it as liabilities, unfunded liabilities. But similar to what Councilmember Capoche is saying is, just because we're disclosing it, why is the amount higher?
Why are we paying more just because we're disclosing it?
That's what I'm,
Yeah,
no,
that's
so
what
I
I'm
understand
saying
your
a different way,
concern
yeah.
is that, okay, so now we're claiming it and now we see it on the books, but just because we're disclosing it, it still should be the same unfunded liability amount, but why is the difference, why are we paying a difference at a higher rate?
Well, because of this new requirement, we have to disclose this information on our
Right.
financial statements.
Got that.
And so it will disclose the liability. If we don't show that we're pre-funding it or paying against it, our liability just will continue to grow. But that's really an option, a decision for city council to make. We're recommending continuing on that path of pre-funding that liability. But if council decides not to, we will not be dinged for that. It just show a larger liability on our financial statements.
Okay, so the question that I think we're asking and not getting an answer is, how much was our payment last year?
Didn't
We-
pay any, 2 years ago.
We've been prepaying this more than the ARC payment. The last payment the city made was $300,000.
Okay, so it was 300,000.
And that's before we were still underfunded. This year, we met our goal and we're actually have an asset towards the explicit liability. But because of this new requirement, we had to disclose this off-the-books liability per se. It was off the books before, now it's required to be on the books.
So the liability was always there, we just didn't know
It
about
had
it?
not been calculated because we were not required to.
Right.
I'm having the same struggle.
So it's off the books, it doesn't exist except that it does exist.
Well, according to
That's
this,
how they do it in the
Gatsby,
federal government, so.
this is accounting requirements. Yeah, before we were not required to disclose the liability. If you recall years back before Gatsby 45, we didn't have to disclose anything. It was pay as you go. So they've been changing the requirements as we go, same as PERS, pension retirement. So it's been changing, and this time initially we had to perform an actuarial due to Gatsby 45. Now they're asking us to perform an actuarial evaluation also on the implicit rate, and then disclose that liability on the books.
So the
what changes-
liability's always been there, it's just that we didn't see it.
It wasn't reported on the books. Just like initially, we were not reporting even the explicit liability until Gatsby 45 came along. Now they added another one, so it's implicit liability.
So the bottom line is if we make this payment, we're still better off in the long run, the city is.
Yes, because the liability will show that there are assets there
Well, we're
funding.
just paying more than we had planned.
Correct.
Yeah, so it really comes down to our decision. We want to spend that money or not now, or, pay me now or pay me later.
Liability, correct.
Is this baked into the new budget that we're going to discuss later?
No, we're recommending it come out of this fiscal year. We're still at,
June
pay it before June 30th.
Okay.
Every other year payment.
Oh, every other year, thank you.
So,
Until the next actuarial comes up,
In 2 years from now.
we'll see what's new then.
okay, we've
So then
asked,
the follow-up question, sorry, is it incorporated into this year's budget? Or is there a savings that we're identifying?
No, this would add to our deficit for the current fiscal year.
So it's coming from reserves?
And why would we want to do that and not?
It's just a recommendation to keep in this fiscal year. If the council prefers it hits next fiscal year, we can do that also.
and why, I don't recall, we discussed this. Why, again, are you recommending it for this fiscal year? Just to get it off the books, get it out of the way?
To get it, because we would be taking action prior to June 30th.
Right, okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Director Medina. Do we have other items on the consent calendar? Other questions? Okay, hearing none, let's open this to public comment on any item on the consent calendar.
Hi, Barbara Lee Klein. On this last item A, and I'm going to ask, what do we have in reserves at this time? And since we'll see an increase in 2 more years, depending on what's voted in by Sacramento, then if we do have an emergency such as an earthquake or a fire that rips through the town, then I guess everybody that's getting paid out of this extra amount then will be here manning the desks and the phones, helping out in case of a giant emergency. Because it looks like it's going to be pulling a lot out of our reserves. Anyway, I'm really up here to ask, all these years I've been coming here, and so many people out in the public, when we quickly read through the payments of the cities and the warrants and the aggravated amount of, could you please start defining the aggravated amount of, and then read the amount, and explain what exactly those amounts go to fund? I mean, tonight, the warrant for $486,000, library warrant in the amount of $12,000, payroll transfer in the amount of $329,000. I've been coming to council many, many years, so I understand a lot of this, but I know people out in TV land don't get to hear the figures and don't understand huge amounts of money that are being pulled and where they're going, what they're doing. Then I'm going to jump down to consent item D. do we have a representative for our Pasadena school system? It was Bart Doyle. And who is it now, and when can we expect a report, even though it's summer school, when can we expect a report on what's going on with the school districts? Thanks.
Thank you, Barbara. Any other public comment? Okay. Hearing none. You didn't pull that off the calendar, so we're dealing with all these at one time. Do we want to have some discussion about the OPED?
Well, I'm okay with it. I want to see in 2 years what it looks like again, so I'm okay with making the payment now. I don't know how everybody else feels, but
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, this is, to me, it's not that surprising or shocking. I mean, it's trying to pre-fund liabilities that stretch out 50 to 100 years is,
yeah.
it's a lot of guesswork that plays into it, and
Yeah.
different discount rates are used, and different accounting standards are applied, and we see this year after year with different types of pension liabilities. So I'm just not that surprised. I think that it makes sense, and it makes fiscal sense to start pre-funding it now. And then you could always take that money back. And at some point, we need to, the premiums that we're charging the employees now are just not sufficient. And I'm not sure if we have any ability to increase the premiums or what we can do, but we need to start accounting for this in our budget and in the way that we account for our premiums charged to our employees, so.
And I just expect a thank you from the Council of 2030. That would make their life so much easier.
Don't hold your breath. Yeah, I think we should do this too. I mean, we're saving money in the long run, right?
Well, we're doing the right thing and not burdening the future with the problem.
That's right.
But we do need to try to figure out how you, not that what we're doing, I think what we're doing is great, but we need to figure out how we subsidize that. Like, how are we going to get a revenue stream to actually pay for that?
Yeah.
And one way is to actually, if we're underfunded, if our premiums aren't covering our eventual liabilities, then you have to increase the premiums, right? I mean, so are we allowed to do that? I don't know.
Pension, most of this is pension.
Yeah,
though,
these
so
are
it's
pension.
not a
This
matter
is
of-
OPEB.
No, these are OPEB, so these are medical, and so I assume that this is just a pretty simple, you charge more for your premium.
No.
I mean, from reading the report, the layman, and maybe Marcy can address this, it's pretty simple. Our premiums aren't enough to meet our liabilities.
Not the premiums.
There are a lot of assumptions here when we're talking about the implicit subsidy, and I had this long discussion with the actuary. And we're currently subsidizing with employee premiums. They're looking at this liability in the future, it might separate. So in 2 years, when we receive the new actuarial, then we can make a decision to stop funding based on assumptions at that point in time, because GASB 65 is going to change again. So next couple of years, we're going to see another change. Then we can make the determination, because in all reality, we are currently subsidizing with current employees. So who's to say in the future that we will not continue to do that if it's going to change? So there are a lot of assumptions that are made in this actuary and actually have to be made. So right now we are paying, subsidizing, and we're paying that with current employee premiums. So they want to disclose this liability, and I'm saying let's pay to continue to be pre-funded. In 2 years, we'll take a look at the actuarial at that point in time and then see if we have a better idea of what's going to happen in the future. And we might not want to contribute to additional to this liability, because if we're going to continue to subsidize it with current and active employee premiums, then if we're going to plan on continue that at that rate, and there's not going to be no additional change on the insurance market and so forth, then we can elect to not continue or pre-funding the implicit rate.
Director Medina mentioned that there's a lot of assumptions that go into this, and previous councils have actually been very proactive on this area You remember the OPEB is coming from the retiree medical that we're paying. Well, as years go on, we're paying less and less retiree medical because the requirements for an employee to actually receive retiree medical are quite
High threshold.
it's a very high threshold. You have to work for the city, I think it's 20 years. You have to retire at 60, so then there's only a 5-year period that you would receive the benefit. The benefit that the city's paying is the lowest premium that's available. So previous councils, and including some of yourselves, have taken a lot of steps to lower this. And there may continue to be opportunities to lower this. Our retiree health exists because we're part of PEMCA, which is CalPERS's medical benefit plan, and we're part of PEMCA because we have so few lives that we have not been able to join or find any other medical carrier to carry us. The League of California Cities has also been really working hard about creating a new exchange that cities like ourselves could join, specifically because some of these retiree health issues have become so stringent and so burdensome on cities that they can't pre-fund because they have such generous benefits that we have not been in that issue. But I anticipate in a year or two we may have another option for looking at for medical benefits, which would then change what we are required to do on the retiree medical side. So there are a lot of pieces, and this is going to be a consistently moving ball. And it's all based off of, as Director Medina said, a whole bunch of assumptions, and most of them are assumptions that every one of our employees that works for us now is going to continue to work for us through retirement. That's essentially one of those assumptions.
So, well, that's an interesting point that you make on that particular assumption, because as Madam City Manager says, our threshold is so high to collect it, yet the accounting and actuarial rules
Conservative.
are very conservative.
Correct.
So, so again, like for right now, I don't really have a problem with doing this, but in 2 years, maybe we ought to take a harder look at it and see if we can get them to calculate it with assumptions that are really more appropriate to our actual situation. And maybe we find that our liability in the future is not so great, and maybe we're back to being overfunded again.
How many people are we currently paying retirement benefits for?
Oh,
It's just a handful.
I'd say a dozen maybe, and I could be, plus or minus 6, but we are not, even for those, it's a portion,
Right.
it's not their entire benefit, it's not their benefit and their dependents. It's a very modest.
So let's just say, so out of 75 people that worked for the city that are now retired, possibly we pay 5 of them or 6 of them.
I should take a step back. Anybody that retires from the city is actually, under PEMCA, required to get what we call the MEC, the minimum employer contribution. And that amount is no more than $125 this fiscal year. It does get adjusted every single year. So anybody that retires from the city automatically gets that amount. It is those employees that work here for over the 25 years that then get the full lowest premium.
Well, we don't write a check for that first amount.
We do not write an amount we don't write a check to the employee for that amount, but we are sending that money to PERS. And that is being calculated in this actuarial report.
Okay.
We are writing checks to those employees who have worked here for that extended period of time, who then have earned that additional portion, and essentially they get billed by CalPERS for their benefits, and then we are subsidizing that additional
So that's
amount.
this $466.11 that we pay to
Correct.
these people.
And some of them are different because of when they retired and what benefit they fall under, but yes.
I think on this one, this report, there's only about 9 that I counted here.
And once they turn 65, that benefit ends. So it's really a
Because they go to
5-year,
Medicare.
because they go to Medicare. So it's a 5-year benefit that is provided, at least under the current rules. Anybody that retires now has to retire at 60, so many years, and they get the benefit for 5
So
years.
if they retire at the age of 55, when they turn 60, they don't get the benefit.
Correct.
Because
You
they
have to retire from the city at 60, or between 60 and 65.
So we should be in good shape.
The odds are very
We're
much.
gonna pay a
with
little
the
more
city
to
on
make
this one.
sure.
Right.
And so I guess my question, do we have any control over the monthly premiums that are charged for employees?
No.
Okay.
So the premiums are set by
They're set
PEMCA.
by-
And that is why so many cities are looking, because of how the premiums are set and because of really, the big driver was this retiree OPEB requirements and what PEMCA requires us to provide. That's why they're looking at creating that new medical exchange for cities.
Okay.
And PEMCA is the largest purchaser of medical benefits in the state of California. So they have a lot of purchasing power in there, which gives them a lot of power in general to set things how they want to do it.
Okay.
All
We have a
right.
motion in support of the consent
I'll
calendar.
move that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
I'll second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll move on to public hearing, item number 2 on the agenda.
Mayor, members of City Council, this is the presentation of the new fiscal year, which starts July 1, 2016, annual budget. There are a number of resolutions for your consideration. At the conclusion of the staff report, there is a PowerPoint presentation, Mr. Mayor, to go over the budget in a bit of detail, so the council can feel comfortable with what they would be considering this evening. It is recommended that you give us direction and input. If you would like us to change something, what the process is we can actually revise the resolutions. You can still adopt it this evening. We can make changes today. And then the budget is adopted by July 1st. And then we always return, because we don't know what changes the council is going to make to the budget document. The pretty document itself will come to you 2 council meetings from now. So that's the process we're working with. In the meantime, Director Medina has a staff presentation. She is giving the entire presentation. It is quite a few PowerPoint slides. So if you could just bear with us for a bit.
I think I might have jumped the gun just a second. I think Barbara Lee had some questions for us
Oh, okay.
about the consent calendar that we should try to address if we can.
The amount in reserves, I will have to get that to her. I don't know off the top of my head which reserves. I'm assuming she's talking general fund reserves. I don't remember the amount at our last audit. We're going to be doing a new audit here soon. I'm guessing $5 million range, but it's going from way back in my memory banks. On the warrant register, if it's the council's desire, I can read the amounts that we're approving. To go into the details of what each of those amounts is actually funding would take up a whole council meeting. But I will do whatever the city council would like me to do, but at a minimum, I can read the amounts. That's not an onerous and time-consuming requirement, so I can do that. And then we do not have, I know that we do not have we have council members that serve. We have a council member liaison to the elementary school. We have a council member liaison to Collaborate Pasadena. I am not aware of Mr. Doyle being a formal city council appointee to anything, but I'm not aware of that. I could be mistaken.
Wasn't he appointed before we actually had an elected school board member?
No, he was involved with the bond.
He's involved with the bonds. He joined a committee, and it wasn't a council appointee, as I recall. Was it?
The council
Okay.
appointed him to represent us on the redistricting.
Okay.
Right, it was the
Okay,
redistricting.
you're right. And that has been completed.
Right.
Right. That is the only formal appointment of Mr. Doyle to anything that I'm aware of, was the redistricting effort.
And now Sierra Madre actually has a board member,
Right.
so we elect as the city.
Correct.
Not as the city council, but the public
The
elects.
public elects our board member. That is correct. Part of the redistricting effort.
His name is Larry Torres.
Right.
Okay,
Thank you, Madam City Manager.
sorry about that.
Okay, let's move on with item
The
number
budget.
2. Director
There is a
Medina.
long PowerPoint presentation. You have a copy of it before you. And again, Director Medina will be giving the entire presentation. We do have all of the directors here this evening. Should there be an item that you would like staff to provide further details on in a particular department, our directors are all here for that purpose this evening.
Before we go on, the actual general fund reserve at the end of fiscal year 2015 was 7.4 million with a designated portion of about 1 million. Good evening, Mayor, council members. Tonight, I present to you the fiscal year 2016-2017 proposed budget. The citywide budget, we're looking at primarily a status quo budget, and it's made up of the various funds, successor agency, our two major enterprise funds, sewer and water, the business funds, which include special events and filming, and then the internal service funds. These are charges to other funds for internal services such as human resources, administration, technology, facility maintenance, and fleet. And then we come to our special revenue funds. Primarily, these revenues are made up of transportation funds, Measure R, Prop A, Prop C, gas tax, and there's other smaller grant funding sources. And these are revenues that are restricted to a specific purpose. Finally, we come to the general fund, which is our largest source of revenues. And here, when you look at the pie chart for the citywide expenditures, which includes transfers out, you see a similar chart. So the revenues and expenditures are pretty much this, look close to each other. General fund, it's the total budget here for the citywide, we're looking at appropriations of 24.5 million, with the general fund making up 44% of that's those revenue sources at 10 million, expenditures at 10.9 million. This brings us to the main focus of the presentation, the general fund. In looking at the general fund, we made some changes for fiscal year 16-17. We collapsed operations that were subsidized operations that were before reported on individual funds. Recreation classes, the paramedic program, development services. So now you see the more of a complete picture on the total cost of the general fund operations. In looking at revenues, looking at are projecting an increase of about 8%, mainly made up of property taxes and utility users tax. Here, the main focus is on the two largest general fund revenue sources. Property tax, you can see, has been increasing from year to year. We're projecting a secure property tax rate increase of 5%. And we're looking at projecting total revenues for fiscal year 16-17 at 5.5%, 5.5 million. In looking at a utility users tax in yellow, we can see the decline in UUT due to the sunset of the UUT at 8% in fiscal year, the current year. And then we're projecting for fiscal year 16-17 increase due to the voter approved UUT to 10% across the board, which comes up to 2.7 million. In looking at the expenditures, including transfers out, the transfers out have greatly diminished. We're only looking at about 34,000. That's mainly because the bulk of the transfers were made to the subsidized funds. So we're looking at transfers out to the water fund for the water discounts and a transfer to an assessment district to make it whole. About 50% of the expenditures or the appropriations are public safety appropriations, that's between police and fire. The other large piece of the pie or the appropriations is admin services at 22%. This is mainly due that most of the city general appropriations, general fund cost are charged to admin services. This includes allocations too. Here's a different presentation on general fund revenues and expenditures, as well as the impact to fund balance. Gives you a perspective in comparison to prior years and our estimated numbers for fiscal year end 15-16. On top, we have the projected revenues for total revenues of 10.6 million, and including transfers in, we got 10.7 sources, and we had the expenditures for the various departments. You see increases mainly into administrative services. You see a large jump. This is mainly due to reallocations from internal service funds. What we did, another change that we did in citywide was we took a look at our internal service allocations. And we analyzed the basis for those allocations, changed the basis for the allocations, and also went to making sure those internal service funds fully cover the expenditures of the fund, and that we also build proper reserves within those funds, up to 20% in reserves. This created an increase in allocations, total allocations, which when we're talking about allocations, they mainly hit the admin services department. That's the general fund portion. Another change to the allocations that magnifies this number in admin services is that we also look at a workers' comp rate, which is allocated through payroll. We were charging, as part of our workers' comp rate, also personnel administration as well as general liability insurance. So we broke it out so the workers' comp rate now reflects the cost of workers' compensation. And we are now allocating personnel administration as well as general liability insurance through a regular allocation. That allocation does not get allocated to the various departments as payroll does, but it gets allocated to administrative services, the general fund portion. So there was a shift from the other departments too, from workers' comp to admin services because of the allocation, the change in the allocation on workers' comp. This provides us with a better figure too on salary and benefits to get more of a true cost of the cost of payroll. Looking at the bottom line, our total expenditures are looking at 10.9, and we're looking at a change in fund balance of 213 deficit. And we're looking at transfers out to the CIP of 179,000, which is mainly NPDES. It's all NPDES. So we're looking at a net change in fund balance of 392,000. However, we're recommending that we use one-time reserves to fund the sheriff's contract of 400,000 for this year, and also the NPDES cost. So that comes up to 579 that we're recommending we use reserves for one-time expenditures. So this would result in a sense, a surplus in use of current resources. So if you look at the current year and the current use of funds, we would have a surplus of 187,000. But our net impact using reserves and everything would be 392 deficit. Here is a chart that displays the impact from the collapse funds. You have recreation classes, the paramedic program, and development services. The impact was on revenues was charges for service of 485,500, licensing permits 345,100. So total revenue impact, increased revenues in the general fund because of this collapsing of those subsidized operations of 830,600. And on the expense side, of course, you have a larger number. We're looking at 2,068,000 for a general fund subsidy of 1.2. Here's the same chart that I provided to you before, but here you see the impact of those subsidized funds now being presented in the general fund. So in reality, it created a slight increase in the revenues, but more of an increase on the expenditures to result in a subsidy of 1.2. So without those subsidies, all the departments are pretty much coming in within the same budget as before. There have really been no increases.
If we could pause for a moment, on the total expenditure line, I would like to point out, without this collapse fund column, it would give somebody the appearance that we went from about 8.4 million to 10.9 million in a year. This chart was prepared to show that 2 million, almost 2.1 million, has to do with bringing in the council might recall, in fact, you see it on this chart, transfers out, current fiscal year 1.4 million. This fiscal year it's $34,000. So what we're essentially doing is, this is an attempt to make the budget more transparent, more easily understandable. Someone will be able to pick up this fiscal year 16-17 budget document, look at the fire department, and see exactly what the fire department costs. One of the things, as you recall, when we were doing the community outreach on our budget, the current fiscal year, community planning community preservation, when we would show this chart, it would show zero expenses, because that was always kept out in a separate fund, so that we could track what's the cost of the department versus the revenues we're bringing in, so how much is the general fund subsidy. Doing it this way, we go from showing, zero current fiscal year for community planning, community preservation, to showing in the budget document, it's going to say 1.149 million. So people will be able to see what planning and community preservation. Before, I don't like to use the word buried because that sounds bad, but it was buried in that 1.42 million. You had to know what numbers to add together to get the total department costs. So I do think this is a significant improvement in how we prepare our budget, how we present it, how the information can be easily understood by the public. But it does result in this one time, it looks like we went from 8.3 million to 10.9 million in a matter of a year. We can't change the previous years because those were audited numbers. That's how we did it then. But as we go forward a few years, eventually we will have apples and apples, and these comparisons will make a lot more sense. I just feel it's worth an explanation, because people will say, we increased our budget by $2 million over a one-year period of time, and I wanted to correct that information before that gets any legs and starts being quoted out in the public.
Another thing that I wanted to point out is that it appears that police went down drastically. Actually, this has also to do with the shift in the allocation for workers' comp. The workers' comp, a lot of it was absorbed in the police. So we're talking about a $300,000 shift from workers' comp here that now is being allocated over here because it was not really workers' comp. So 300,000 roughly workers' comp allocation that now is charged through a general allocation to admin services. Here's a graph that really gives you a good visual on how we've been doing in revenues in the blue line in comparison to expenditures. And you see fiscal year 12, that's what we were pretty much upside down. We had expenditures that exceeded our revenues. Our revenues took off. And then we see...
I always like to remind folks, that's the windstorm, just for his posterity, just for historical sense.
The windstorm in 12, you see the expenditures are higher than the revenues. And then we see that happening again in 16. That's mainly due to the UUT revenues exceeding, and the expenditures did go up. And now for fiscal year 16-17, we're projecting that expenditures will exceed revenues. This is mainly due to the dip into reserves for those one-time expenditures for the sheriff's contract and also NPDES, transfer to capital projects. Now I have a slide for each department here that I'll briefly go over. points of highlights or particular points of notice to take note of for the various departments. Starting with administrative services, we are looking at status quo operations. So we'll manage to maintain our public counter hours from 7:30 to 5:30 p.m. Monday through Thursday. I mentioned changing internal service fund allocations that which resulted in significant increase in expenditures for administrative services department. Part of those allocations are now include the JPI insurance payment that before you were having to come back and approve a transfer to the internal service fund. Now this is all being absorbed under the allocation, so you will not be looking at this request to set up an additional appropriation for the JPI insurance payment.
Can I stop you and ask a question? You don't mind? To me, that second bullet is a pretty significant thing here because of what you said earlier, is that you're charging 120% now to build up reserves, so to speak, for things like what, motor vehicles and
Technology and insurance and,
So really, so what you're presented, just backing up a little bit, you're really presenting a slight deficit budget, but if we decided not to put away money for these other things, we could easily bring that back within balance, right? I mean,
correct. If, another way to say that, if we funded 100%
yes.
instead of 120%,
Yeah.
that does result in additional money left over.
Right, so can you back up one slide? So that's why fiscal year 2017 is on this trajectory. It's not because we're spending more money, in a sense, it's partly because of the increase in this fund allocation.
That's
Partly,
part of
right?
it. That's part of it.
Yes.
Yeah, because when I look at the budget, I'm not seeing increases in
increases.
expenses in the departments.
Correct.
Correct.
I just want to emphasize that because that graph looks like, oh, we're spending a lot of money, but we're really not. We're putting away money to fund future liabilities again because cars will break, technology gets outdated, and we need to spend that. So, okay, I just
Correct.
wanted
Yeah,
to
that's part of it,
make that
definitely.
point.
Definitely.
Another change in admin services is that phone services now got moved from facilities management to technology services, which is a different fund and also a different department. It was under public works, now it's under admin services. For planning and community preservation, fairly a status quo budget with the exception that we're looking at recommending a change eliminating the part-time code enforcement officer position and creating a full-time position, and which would be funded. The additional funding for that is about $35,000. Would be funded 75% general fund and 25% water fund. Let's see what else. The hours will continue. The counter hours will continue to be 7:30 to 2 p.m. Police, fairly status quo budget. You'll hear that this for pretty much every department. This does include increases for the approved MOU for police association. So this is included in the budget presented to you. For library, status quo budget, which will continue providing 47 hours of open public access per week. And we'll continue to use donations and other such funds as Gift and Memorial and Friends of the Library to continue funding special programs or projects. Community services, we looked at, we are filling vacancies. The upgrade to the admin analyst position was done this fiscal year, fiscal year 16. And we're looking at the same continuation, the same level of community and senior service programming.
If I could just clarify, the upgrade to the administrative analyst position is something that is a change that is recommended for the new fiscal year. We have a position that was downgraded about 2 years ago, 2012, because the position was no longer reporting to a director. As you're aware, we've already, which is Director Medina referred to, we've combined library and community services, and the administrative assistant will be reporting to a director again. So the recommendation is to restore that position back to the higher level administrative position.
On fire, status quo. As I mentioned, we collapsed the paramedic fund. Now it's part of the general fund. And there's a new dispatch fee that it's effective July 1st that was approved earlier this year, and is part of the user fee schedule. For Public Works, we have some vehicle and equipment purchases that are mainly funded by AQMD and also fleet services.
It's in the staff.
There are no changes, no recommended changes on staffing levels or operations. And the counter hours are also continue the same, which is 7:30 to 2 p.m. And now we come to the two major city enterprise funds. The sewer fund, same as prior years, it continues to run a deficit, which we had healthy reserves to start with, but they are depleting. We still have healthy reserves for fiscal year 16-17, but as a fiscal year ending 2015, we were looking at about 700,000 in reserves. So we're looking at it's depleting quickly. Water fund. Water fund, I provided a different chart, and I want to call out that in the agenda item, this is a revised one from the agenda item that does not impact the projections for 16-17, but at the prior years, I had, there was a formula error. So this is replaces the chart on page 7 of your agenda report. And I broke it out by operations, depreciation, capital outlay, because although depreciation is not a cash flow item, we budget the same way as we do our accounting, which is full accrual accounting, and depreciation is an expense. Therefore, and I separated capital outlay. Capital outlay, these are expenditures that will not be capitalized, most likely will not be capitalized. And here you see your investment in capital assets. These are outflows, but these are not considered expenditures because it's an actual investment in a capital asset. It will be depreciated over time. So for prior years, I don't need to worry about this because you see the capital outlay small because the rest of it has been capitalized. Where we had water main replacements and so forth, those qualify for capitalization. Therefore, they become an investment and not an expenditure.
And
So-
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to translate for folks who aren't accountants in the room, we're presenting it a little differently this year because it has always been a challenge, and I know council members have tried to do this in the past. You want to match the budget to the audit at the end of the year, and the numbers never match, they're different numbers. This will make it easier for you to do that in the future. Again, another attempt just to clarify and make our financial records all easier to understand.
Because our budget policy has been to prepare budgets in accordance to GAAP, the same as we do with our accounting, but somehow we got distracted along the way. This is bringing it back. So as our city manager Aguilar mentioned, if you look at our financials, this is your bottom line. And here it got invested in capital assets. I'm not disclosing that because this doesn't really impact the operation. This is your change in net position at year end for fiscal year 14, fiscal year 15. In 14, we had a higher bottom line that went into reserves, a higher surplus. This is mainly because the water purchase was not actually reflected in fiscal year 14. That started in fiscal year 15, and we had to do an adjustment to the prior year. So that's why this number looks higher. It was already audited and so forth in fiscal year 15, last fiscal year. We then made an adjustment to prior years, which impacted the reserve amount. We don't go back and adjust the prior year physically. So that's why you have a higher number here. And it decreases in fiscal year 15 because we have the large water purchase. And if you look at a current year, fiscal year 16, I want to call out, and I did show some of this in the mid-year review, but charges for services, although we had a rate increase, the charges for service for water services actually decrease. It's mainly due to water conservation. Where we managed to make up some of that amount is in the water penalties. So total revenues are projected to come in at 4.6 million, which is slightly higher than fiscal year 15. On the operations, you do have your water purchase. You have more of capital outlay. This is projected at this point in time to come up with the expenditures of 4.3 with a change in net position of 280. For fiscal year 16-17, we're projecting a very slight increase to the charges for services. We're keeping the water penalties at the same amount at this point in time to see the impact of the new penalties that will be in play this year. Plus also sometimes when penalties first start, you get a high increase and then they kind of flatten out and decrease as time goes out and people get used to it and conserve more. On the expenditures, the capital outlay, this is not capitalizable. This is actually a contribution to a regional project. And our Public Works Director, Inman, called the agency, and they're allowing us to defer this to the next year. What I would be recommending is to pay half fiscal year 16-17 and the other half the following year. That way we don't see that significant impact on the bottom line for 1 year.
This is a change you will see between this presentation and the numbers in your agenda packet and what the final budget document that comes back to you. When this budget document was put together, these numbers, we were still under the impression, this is for the Santa Anita project, that we were going to have to make the full amount this year. Director Inman contacted them and was able to get it deferred. We would like to mitigate the impact of that by spreading it over 2 years. So this is an area where this number will change when it comes back to you in the final budget document.
So really this number is what makes it going the red here. We have a negative. And here these are the projects in the CIP that we're looking at capitalizing and not deferring to future years. 675,500, and we'll go into more detail in the capital and another slide. Here's another graph showing how the expenditures compare to revenues for the water operation. And you see in fiscal year 12, also the expenditures exceeded, and we had the water rates that study. The new rates came into effect in fiscal year 14, so that we see their revenues go up. Then fiscal year 15, you see that expenditures and revenues are pretty much the same, and this is due to the water purchase. And here you see the revenues flattening out for 16, total revenues. And then we see here for fiscal year 16-17 that we're projecting the expenditures to be higher. That does include the 450 that you saw in the previous slide. So otherwise we'll be about the same here. Now this comes to the final slides of the presentation. So we're winding down. This is the summary of the capital purchases that was included in the agenda report. We're looking at, for capital purchases, all these amounts for fiscal year 16-17, we're projecting capital purchases of $528,600. These numbers are included in the various departmental fund budgets. And the bulk of the purchases are funded by special revenue funds and enterprise funds.
The details of these were emailed to you earlier this afternoon.
Here are the capital projects, and the details were also emailed to you. But when you're looking at, we have, this is a new column for our capital projects we're trying to disclose a carryover. This is an estimated amount because the year hasn't come to a close. So fiscal year 15-16, these are the carryovers that we have. They total 1.2 million. If you recall in prior budgets, you would have to go and commit funds towards the end of the year. If we transfer them to the CIP, we show a transfer, which is an expenditure in that particular, the general fund mainly. Then they're actually carried over with the CIP fund. So you don't have to worry about committing those funds again. Once you appropriated them, they're going to be carried over systematically in the capital projects fund. That is mainly for the general fund projects or mixed projects, because capital projects within water, enterprise funds, or internal service funds, they are recorded in the individual fund. It's only for general fund that and split funded projects that you would have that reside in the capital improvements fund. So for fiscal year 16-17, we're projecting total projects of 2.1 million. The bulk of the projects are funded by special revenue funds and the enterprise funds. With general fund portion, it's only the 178,500,000, which is NPDES projects. And on the water fund, what we did was we only budgeted the ones that can be deferred. The rest of the capital projects appropriations will come to you once the water capital master plan is approved and completed and approved. There's also another correction that I want to make, and the report, the agenda report, on page 11, that showed a project for 10,000 that was state funded. Correction, it's not state funded, it's state required. And that's a water project. I believe it was page 11. This is our final slide. Action items for City Council tonight are approve Resolution 1644, adopting the fiscal year 2016-17 budget. Resolution 1645, approving the GAN appropriations limit for fiscal year 16-17. Resolution 1646, approving the fiscal year 16-17 fee schedule, which was increased by the CPI of 2%. Resolution 1647, approving the salary matrix. And Resolution 1609, which approves also the fiscal year 2016-17 budget for the Public Financing Authority. This concludes my presentations. Any further questions that you have, I'm here to answer them.
Should we do questions and then maybe take a break before we have discussion?
Sure.
Okay. Questions for Director Medina?
I have some really basic questions, but Director Medina, I do want to thank you. I mean, that's, to be able to provide that presentation, I know there are a lot of slides, but with such complex issues here, all integrated, I do want to thank you. Also, thank you for the changes in the presentation and the reporting with the capital outlays and the collapsing of the funds. It is hard to compare previous years. I understand if we continue doing this, it'll be a little easier, but I can appreciate the changes that are made just in light of transparency and to better understand some of these items. Really, really basic questions. First question is, when do we expect the RDA residual dollars to stop coming in from the state, is my first question. And do we? I mean, I understand the state's trying to do something, not calling it redevelopment, but I know at some point we are not going to be expecting those dollars. So that's the first question.
We're looking at this point in time, they're asking agencies that qualify for it could file their final ROPS. But we're looking at, if we file a final ROPS, it would be one more year. But otherwise, it would be, I believe it's 2-3 years at the most.
Because, I mean, obviously with the size of our budget, that really will impact us. Okay, and then my next question had to do with sales tax. Maybe you had mentioned this, but why are we seeing, what was the big change from 2014-15 to 15-16? Did something happen during that time?
Well, the triple flip winded down, that's part of it, which the triple flip, we were receiving money through the state on our property tax remittance, not directly. So that changed, but mainly what is just less sales tax. Apparently, we don't have a lot of sales operations here, but we've seen a decrease this current year, and we're projecting that it's probably going to be flat for next year.
Okay.
We don't see any new businesses coming into town to generate such a sales tax numbers to cause an increase. But that might change, and at mid-year, we'll look at the numbers again and see what the trend looks like and reanalyze.
Okay. And then my last question had to do with the 179 for MPDES. Do I recall correctly, that's still an estimate and that there could be a change there also?
Yes, correct. And there'll be other presentations coming up that will provide you maybe with a better estimate. These are just for, we do have a carryover, so we're carrying funds, and we're trying to build some funds there just for the immediate needs, but it is just a rough estimate, and we don't know what the actual
Like a
number will be.
placeholder of sorts?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. That's my quick questions. Thanks.
I have a question about the capital projects for the water fund. We show $1 million, or a little over $1 million. What is that comprised of? I see in the report about $600,000 in projects that we
Yes.
talk about. What was the additional 400? Was that the
Oh, the-
Santa Anita project? Is that what?
Yes, the sanity is the 450.
Okay, so it's the 600 and then plus the 450 for the, okay,
Correct.
thanks.
Just a question on, the administrative services again. How much, if we were to fund at 100% instead of 120, what difference would that make in the budget overall?
About 300,000. 300,000.
All just 300,000?
And sorry, can you, yeah, and this is a good point, could you just explain that again? Because that didn't jump out at me, I don't know how that was obvious to you, but where in the budget could someone, like a novice, realize that we're doing the 120 versus the 100%?
The only way you would know that is it's going to be in the budget message, because it is truly just, it's allocated in the amounts that are allocated to each of the departments. So it's going to be something that will be in the budget message, that we're funding 120% of our internal service funds, but that would be it.
And we did that, this is the first year that we're doing that?
No, we've done it in the past. It actually was a council council policy decision to fund 120% so that we can build up reserves. The example I always like to give, quite a few years ago now, when we purchased our new financial software system, that was a couple $100,000 project. Money did not have to come out of the general fund to pay for that, because over the years we had been adding to our technology internal service fund. The idea is you set aside money a little bit each year, so eventually when these major purchases come due, you have the money to pay for them, vehicles, technology, facilities. So it was a prior council directive to do 120%. We weren't able to reach that threshold last year because we were running that big deficit last year that we were aware of because of the UUT sunsetting. This year, because it was prior policy direction. We've put it back in the budget, but ultimately, this is your budget. And if you would like us to do 100%, we'll go back and do 100%.
Well, to me, it's a good point because we wouldn't have a deficit budget if we weren't doing the 120%. You'd have,
Slight deficit
slight,
budget.
less than $100,000 or so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, it's fungible, whether we're taking it from the general fund and doing 120% or just doing 100%, 100% and not taking it from the reserves. So I'm fine with that, but it's interesting. That wasn't obvious to me, so I think.
I think, like, in this page, well, I printed this, but this is in a presentation where it's showing the differences with the funds being collapsed. I mean, what stands out is that the administrative services is much higher. So $300,000 of that is what we're talking about here, but the other part of it is also the fact that you pull the liability payments out of all the departments and just put it in here.
Correct.
So, okay, but that one was just kind of important to me because, like, just for the reason you just said, I mean, we're just on the brink of a balanced budget. And it shows that deficit, but it's such a prudent thing to do. It's almost silly not to do it because then every time we have to make a capital expenditure, we're hunting for something in the general fund and we have to kill something else to go pay for things that we know are coming up. So, yeah, so I'm okay with it for now, but we'll discuss that in a little bit about, this issue about the balanced budget and taking from reserves to make it balanced, but, so anyway, thank you for answering that question.
No problem.
Any other questions?
I just have a couple. I know that in the narrative in the staff report, we talked about the fire engineers. So I know that that's something that we're looking into, and that was a big concern for everybody. So my understanding is we're waiting for the grant, and possibly the grant will provide those engineers for us. But I just wanted to remind everybody that we will have like a $350,000 change if that grant doesn't come through. And we
Correct.
want to have the engineers that we need.
Is that budgeted, though?
No, we did not budget for the engineers because we are waiting. Any day now, we should hear back the council at a few meetings ago, you authorized us to apply for a grant to fund the 3 engineers. We'll pay for them for 3 years. So we're waiting to hear the results of that grant before we decide to actually budget general fund money for them.
So, but that's a
But it's an
great-
outstanding, it could be a possible huge expense that's lurking in the future for us.
And where do we see the Internal Revenue Services reserves?
In the audit.
Yes.
And we know what they are reserved for, that this amount is for technology, this amount is,
Correct, they are kept
Yes.
separate.
And if you look at the financial statements, there were 2 funds that we didn't do the 20% because they have sufficient reserves. That was facilities maintenance and technology services. But on the other hand, we had administrative services that was like in the red. So,
those are all the questions I have.
I just want to compliment you. It's a wonderful report. It's much easier to understand. I think the using the internal services changes are very wise, and very nice job.
thank you.
Thank you.
Let's do public comment on this, and then I think we'll take a break before we engender discussion.
Hi, Barbara Lee Klein. Just another quick question. How much do we have in the general reserves for emergencies? I'm not talking about the technology reserves, which we heard tonight there was a keystroke error, and that wasn't caught by technology, but at least it was caught. But how much do we have in reserves in case of a major fire or an earthquake? So that maybe we can
You gave
keep
that
some of the
number
money
earlier,
held
about
back
7
and
million.
put there. And then I'm gonna just put a few questions together so I can go back and sit down. Real quick, again, with the fire department for the renewal of the paramedic program. If you've been prior registered, do you need to renew? Is this a renewal for all citizens? Or if you've prior signed up for that, I know there's no representation right now from the fire department. Is this something the public needs to come back, renew everything. And I'm going to stick with emergency for a while, but I'll say that for after you guys come back, from July. Also, the art fund from the Kensington, when is that due? And this is totally off subject, but since we're on the budget, did that get blended into the library? I'm not sure where to fit that in, but I just wanted to call that out right now because that was a large amount of money that will have to go back to the Kensington if not used.
And we do have the Director of Public Safety for the fire questions.
Yes, probably would be best if he talks to Ms. Lee directly, because I wasn't quite sure what her question was, so Director, if you would talk to Barbara Lee regarding that question. The reserve number was answered earlier. It's about 7 million as of the last audit, 2015 audit, I believe it was. And there is a fund reserves. It's not just art. We have a development fee for art, public art. The council's already allocated some money for that. You actually have on a future agenda, I think it's even the next one, some other possible uses for those funds. So those funds will be obligated in the very near future.
I think the answer to the question is they were not allocated to the library.
They were not allocated to the library, thank you. None of it was allocated to the library, and it's not proposed to be.
Any other public comment? Hearing none, let's take a 5-minute break. It was good. Wasn't expecting that.
That was nice.
So we are now in the discussion stage of the budget item.
Discussion.
Are we going to go over the fee schedule?
Well, we can attack this any way you like. There's a lot going on here, so we can go one at a time in terms of the resolutions, or take your pick.
I think I'll make a quick comment about the budget itself. Firstly, I just wanted to say that I am definitely in favor of the code enforcement being full-time. I'm really glad that that was considered. A lot of the issues that come up are code enforcement issues, and we don't have the time and the labor hours to put into that. So I think it's a good step. Of course, if we get more revenue stream into the city, it's nice to see that expand too. But I wanted to make a comment in terms of the budget itself, the general fund budget as a whole. I think, and I had made this comment to the city manager earlier, is that it's hard to see the fund reserves at that level number. And we know why they're there because of NPDS and also the sheriff contract. And we're still estimating that 179 is for NPDS. I guess I'd just rather see a balanced budget, so we see that we have a surplus of 187. I don't know if that means anything for the rest of my colleagues here, but I prefer seeing a balanced budget with less money coming out of the general funds. So I guess that would mean taking out, well, if that's the decision or the direction that city council wants to go into, is just minusing out that 187 surplus from the sheriffs, maybe, or the contract, or from the NPDS.
That would have the net effect of showing a deficit budget.
Would be a smaller deficit.
A deficit budget, no, well, I'm trying to do the math in my head very quickly. The true deficit is 391,500 is the true deficit of this budget. So if the council would like a quote balanced budget, it essentially means going back to all the departments and cutting almost $400,000 out of their budget. For one item, MPDS, which we're not even sure what the final costs are going to be, and for the second item being the sheriff's department, which is a one-time cost. But it is something, should the council want us to do, we can go back and try to find almost $400,000 out of each of the department's budget.
Or not do the 120%.
Right, we save about $300,000 doing that. That's another alternative. That reduces how much we'd have to reduce from department budgets.
Because I do have a hard time wrapping my head around, we're taking out of reserves, but we're saving money, and then,
Then
but
we
we're
have a
not having a
surplus.
balanced budget. It's just not making
I understand.
sense. So I'm kind of like with Mayor Pro Tem. I would like to see it balanced, and you know, I would prefer we not do the 120 this year,
Okay?
and see if we can save on our reserves a little bit.
That makes sense when you put it that way, because the reserve is a $7 million fund there, and we can, if we needed to make an expenditure for something in the future, we could always pull it from reserves if we needed to. But I agree, thinking about it now that you mention it, it doesn't make much sense to pull from reserves to set aside money in a different reserve, so to speak. So I'm in favor of that, so that would get us to
$92,000.
to have a true balanced budget.
And the revenue growth in property taxes is pretty dramatic.
We're estimating 5%.
That's
That's about what we did, almost what we did the current fiscal year.
But I
We're
go back a couple
continuing the
years,
trend.
we've been kind of figuring around 3, haven't we, per year? 3.5.
We were figuring about 3 prior to this current uptick in property
Right.
values, yes.
So that's something that we don't have control over, but right now, that's where the trajectory is. I guess what I'm getting at is we could rebuild $90,000 in the reserve pretty quickly if we just see the kind of increase in revenues we're projecting with the UT and the property taxes.
Just a quick question too about the dispatcher fee. I saw that it wasn't accounted for. Is that reflected in the revenues for general?
No, it's not. That's why it was
At all.
indicated in that. We don't have, we could put in a rough estimate. I think the staff report went to council was 36,000, were a rough estimate from the response fee. So we can put that number in, and that'll reduce the 92,000 by 32,000. So we're at $60,000 out of balance at that point.
So I really enjoyed the presentation. I think the budget looks good, and I would be okay approving it as is, but I think that my comments from my colleagues, I don't think are really earth-shattering, so I'm okay with them, right? I think it, you know, if we don't want to take from the reserves, I think that that's fine, you know, then we don't do the 100%. And if we do want to try to cut 90 or so thousand, I'm not necessarily opposed to that either. I'm okay with the 400 to 500 or so thousand coming from reserves, because I do think the sheriff expenditure is a one-time expenditure that we're not going to have going forward, as long as everything goes right with recruitment and our department gets rebuilt as we think it will. So, you know, and that's what you typically use reserves on, one-time expenditures that are somewhat emergency in nature. So to me, I view the sheriff's expenditure of 400,000 as being something that falls in line with that. So I can kind of stomach the reserve for that. The MPDS, I mean, I can't make heads or tails of that. I don't think anybody can. So it's, you know, any guess is as good as mine. I'm actually a little more concerned that we haven't baked in enough of these other things asked for by the departments that aren't in the budget. For example, like when I read that the plan department wants racks for plans and fireproof cabinets, and we're not giving it to them, to me, it's just like, I mean, if they need that stuff, you know, where are the plans if we don't have racks for them? You know, or are they just like lying on the floor?
No, they're in old racks.
Right. You know, I don't know how much racks for plans and fireproof cabinets would cost, but to me, it seems like we might be able to spend the few extra thousand to do that. Or even, you know, the full-time fire engineers, I think Councilmember Domar touched upon, I think it's a really good point. But even like the full-time admin aide for the police, you know, without that full-time admin aide, are officers doing this admin stuff? And is that causing some sort of inefficiency, or is it more just the chief and the captain are doing it? How are we getting the administrative stuff done?
We have, the position is vacant. We have an interim in there doing it. It would be a service level enhancement above what they've ever had. It's one of those things that I don't want to undervalue or underestimate. There are some administrative tasks that the chief and the captain and the other chief are doing that could be handled by this admin aide. But I would need additional information from, which is why the recommendation there is if the council would like, we can return with additional information on these additional requests, which is why I included them along with possible funding, ways to fund it. And bring back additional, you know, we can bring back additional information on these things.
Yeah. So I guess the short summary is I like the budget. I think we're almost there. It sounds like there's some recommendations from the Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Domar, the mayor. Everyone has had different recommendations that I'm not necessarily opposed to. You know, if we do want to cut some from this budget, I think we can. But I'm also okay with as it is. So I guess bringing back the items that have already been touched upon is fine with me.
Can those changes be made, and can we
Approve it this
approve them
evening? Yes.
tonight? And
Yes.
with those changes?
Yes.
Okay, it wouldn't have to wait. I'm
Only
concerned
thing-
also about
no,
the timing of it.
No, the council can make these changes this evening, which is why we bring it to you in this draft form. We would ask that the mayor not sign the resolutions that the city clerk has. We'll revise the numbers in the resolutions. The mayor will then sign that resolution, a revised one. But you can make these changes this evening.
I would like to see 100% funding, so we're not taking all that out of reserve. But at the same time, understanding that our 400,000 one-time sheriff fee, I don't think we need to cut any in the existing budget. We'll use that, whatever it comes out to be, 92,000 or something from the reserve, because it is a one-time fee.
Good point.
And that makes sense to me.
Yep.
but I still have a hard time saving on one end and taking from the other. So I would like us to fund it 100%, so we have a realistic budget. And again, the fire engineers, the fire department engineers is a concern of mine if that grant doesn't come through. So if the staff can start thinking about where we're going to get that money, that would be good. Other than that, I really do think that it was a really good budget put together. I'm so thankful that we're not doing that whole transfer in, transfer out anymore. That was so confusing. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I like just seeing the numbers.
So I agree with you, we're really talking about a 60-something thousand dollar deficit now because of the 36,000 additional for the dispatch fee. So are we all in agreement there?
Yeah.
Pretty much, I am.
Do that? Okay.
So 36,000 dispatch fee revenues in and 100% internal service fund. Okay?
And then so then the 60-something thousand comes out of reserves to make it a true balanced budget.
Maybe we could come back and next year revisit the 120%.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
So maybe this is just a one-year hiatus.
And our plans, do we have fireproof cabinets now, or are these like new ones that we?
No, these would be brand new ones. It is just a matter of getting additional information on the cost of those and how many we would need. And the biggest thing is where to put them. It's really a space issue more than having a money issue.
Got it.
It's a space issue. I mean, we could line them up here in the council chambers, but that wouldn't look too attractive.
And do we have money in the internal?
Yes, we do. We have enough, we have
Service
enough
for-
in the internal service facilities fund to pay for them, more than enough. It really is more a matter of what they're gonna cost and where we're gonna put them.
So does anyone want to move in favor of Resolution 16-44?
With the two changes
The two
of the adding dispatch fee revenue and 100% internal service funding.
So move.
A second.
Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, now the GAN appropriations limit.
We didn't cover that one during the staff presentation. This is something that we're required to do annually. The good news is, as shown in the resolution, we are way below our GAN limit this fiscal year.
I'll move to approve the GAN limit. Resolution 1645.
And I'll second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
On the fee schedule, again, there are just a few, the fees I would like to, for public benefit, we do increase the fees based upon the CPI, so that increase was done to the fees. The changes were summarized on page 11 of 15. It does include the previously approved 273 EMS response fee. Based on a recommendation from the Community Services Commission, we'd like to remove the table and chair rental fee for rentals so that we can perhaps actually get some rental income from renting our city facilities for parties and things. The Community Services Commission is also recommending a waiver for elected officials to use city facilities for official business. The number one example I like to give is, our congresswoman and would like to use a facility for Women of the Year things, and when we charge, they don't have monies for that. So it would bring those types of events to Sierra Madre. And lastly, we just want to note, because this is an issue every year, the Mount Wilson Troy race fee has been increased by the CPI increase. The committee has always voiced opposition to that. This fee schedule does increase the fee by the CPI, and
What is their
ultimately,
argument? I haven't heard that.
just that it's an expensive race. It's $70. I think the fee has it at 70 something
Keep it
to
affordable
enter.
for people.
That sells out in
It
Right.
sells out
An hour.
in 1 day,
less than a day.
less than a day. So we just bring it forward because, for public disclosure purposes, because staff will hear about it later. So we'd like to just bring it to your attention. Those are the only changes, other than the CPI increases to the fees.
I have a question about, again, this concept of, the furniture rental, getting rid of that so we can rent more. We talked about this before, but things like the Hart Park House, Okay, just looking at the prices for that, for 10 hours, it's $500 is what we're proposing. How many requests do we get that don't actually come to fruition, that people inquire but say it's too much?
The majority of our requests, we're pretty much the only people that will rent our facilities now are those that can be covered under one of our annual use permits.
Yeah.
So we get, or one of our joint use agreements. So it's our nonprofits, the school district, and they're really the only true rentals. We might get one private rental.
Do we know what would you say is the market value of a facility like that in,
We just studied this with the Community Services Commission, and I'm sorry because I'm not remembering what, but we are substantially higher once you add in our rental fee, our table and chair fee, any staff fees. It can get up into the multiple thousands of dollars to rent our facility, as opposed to renting another facility in town may cost under $1,000.
yeah. See, just thinking about this, I mean, should we lower it significantly as sort of an experiment to see if we can bring in actually more revenue? And if we did that, say if we rented it twice a month for the full year, we'd get all this extra revenue. Would we have to wind up paying overtime for staff or anything to do that?
No, we have enough part-time recreation leaders. In fact, we just hired a number of 7 new ones, so we would be able to spread out the facility time between them and experience overtime
They're not
there.
highly paid employees, they're hourly.
And the other thing that we could always do, if that became an issue, is we could always address that in the fees that, because we can get 100% of that cost recovery on staff, we could make sure that that hourly fee was covering the
Yeah,
cost of
yeah.
the staff.
Okay. Is, like for the youth activity center, do we still even have control over that?
We have some control over what's going on in the recreation center. The youth activities, all of the rentals still go through the city. They are not going through the YMCA. The youth activity center, since the inception of the new building, has very strict rental requirements, so it has to be used essentially for a youth program.
Okay.
There can't be any alcohol up there. There's a number of things, so that one has never been rented out. And that was kind of the nature of the building. We wanted to make sure that that was still a very youth-centered area.
Yeah.
But the Sierra Madre room is really where we get the majority of our rentals for that building. And the YMCA, we have an agreement with them where it's basically a 2-week notice that we need to give them in order to be able to book our rentals.
And the Sierra Madre room is the same situation as Hart Park House, that it's very expensive.
Correct.
So I'd like to just in concept, just throw that out to the council. What if we reduce that dramatically to see if we can,
I like it.
Yeah. Like $100 or something like that.
well, even more? I was thinking maybe we should set that aside and have staff come back and make a recommendation of what they think the market rate would be to make it competitive in the marketplace. And try that for a year and see how it works out,
What would you rent the Hart Park House for 10 hours?
I really don't know. I don't know.
We can provide the information that was provided to the Community Services Commission, bring it back, have comparison data. In the meantime, you can adopt the schedule as is.
Yeah.
We will put it on our to-do list to bring the revised. You can always change this fee schedule during the year based on formal council action, so adopt it as it is. We will come back in the very near future with a full report on what we think the rental fees should be to attract more business.
And the commission actually did want to do more study into this, but the timing of when they made the request and when the budget was going forward, they put forth what they did because they wanted to include it in this year's budget. So I'm sure they would be happy to continue.
And what is included in the rental fee? I mean, what are we charging? Are we charging for the liability insurance? Are we charging the staff time? What made up that high fee?
It's all of these. If you look at our facility rental fees, there's all these other little things that come in there, potentially an EMT. The security deposit is also, I think, something that throws people off because it's a pretty decent size.
I mean, a potential EMT, if I was renting something in the private world, they don't have an EMT with
And we require an EMT if somebody is going to be selling or serving alcohol. And it doesn't necessarily that they have to use ours. They can bring in their own, or a registered nurse or above that swears they're not going to be drinking is going to be that responsible person. But per our current policy, if there's alcohol involved,
Yeah.
then we require
Maybe we should.
somebody on site.
Is it because of a liability issue?
Yeah, it was a safety, it's been a longstanding policy, and it's just been so that if there's an emergency, somebody's treated quickly.
I would think that would be a big selling
that-
problem, getting a room. I mean, more than the rate. How many people are going to be able to provide an EMT?
Well, no, they can pay us and we will provide it.
Yeah,
But
we have-
that's one of
but
those
we have
additional
AMTs
fees, is what I'm
on
saying. is-
staff.
Park House, they can walk over here.
Like I said, this was something that the
Yeah, maybe
commission
we
was
could just
interested
look
in
at that.
studying
Yeah,
bigger.
'cause-
or-
Let us have the commission take an in-depth look at this, make a recommendation, and we will bring it back to you and look at all these issues.
But,
Good point of reference for the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to make that suggestion as opposed to bring it back to city council.
Go to
And
the
since the
commission
commission was interested in looking at it anyway, to have them take the first stab at it.
Okay?
I'd be interested to see what the Masonic Temple is rented out for.
That was included in their last staff report, so they have that initial information already, and they were going to look at other
Got it.
other cities' facilities as well.
Okay, so bring that back.
Okay, so,
Now, that Hart Park House with that industrial grade kitchen.
I know,
yeah,
it's amazing.
Does-
Great
get
rental. Doesn't
used.
get
it
rented.
really is a
It's a really nice
resource.
facility.
Yeah, it really is, yeah.
So do we have a motion on the Resolution 16-46?
Move to approve Resolution 16-46 with the direction to staff to come back, or to direct the commission to evaluate the facility schedule further.
I'll second.
Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimously. And the Resolution 1647, approving the salary matrix.
The only change on that one, to summarize, is the changes because of the Police Association MOU, creates a full-time code enforcement officer, and we will have one additional upgraded administrative assistant.
Any discussion? Nope.
I'll make the motion.
And I'll second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Resolution 69.
And the Public Financing Authority budget, that's essentially the former redevelopment agency, our payments for our bonds, some administrative fees we're allowed to recoup. These are our former redevelopment agency dollars coming back to the city to pay for those things.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay.
Okay.
Item number 2 is complete.
Very good.
And that moves us to agenda item number 3, first reading of the ordinance 1377.
We have Director Gonzalez with the staff report on this, and there is no PowerPoint presentation.
This should be fairly brief. This is part of our strategic plan 5-year goals that staff received city council direction from this past year. And among those were revisions to the R3 multiple family residential zone. Those include revisions to the land use implementation measure 36, which is to amend the R3 multiple family residential zone to allow densities of approximately 13 units per acre. Implementation measure 37 to ensure that new development in the R3 zone is compatible in scale and character with other existing structures. Implementation measure 38 to improve the safety of individuals with respect to the location of entrances, height of perimeter fencing, landscaping, and parking. The Planning Commission affirmed a recommendation to make these revisions a top priority and began in April 2016 a Planning Commission which formed a 3-member subcommittee to provide policy direction to staff regarding these issues. The Planning Commission also agreed to move forward with implementation measure 36 on a separate track from the other 2 items that I mentioned, and conducted a public hearing on June 2nd, unanimously forwarding a recommendation to the City Council to approve changes to Chapter 17.28.060 regarding floor area ratio. Those red line changes are included in your packet as Exhibit B, along with the Planning Commission Resolution 1605, attached as Exhibit C. So the revised ordinance introduces new language specific to floor area ratio, which reads as follows, that lots with less than 10,000 square feet of floor area or street frontage of less than 50 feet in width, the floor area of all above-ground structures shall be limited to 55% of the gross lot area. This language is almost replicated in the directive in the General Plan Implementation Measure 36. And to offer an example of what that really means is 55% of the lot area, for example, of a 9,000 square foot lot, would be, you would be allowed to build 4,950 square feet. And that would be the maximum gross floor area that can be developed on a lot given this scenario of 50 feet or less and less than 10,000 square feet. On lots that are greater than 10,000 square feet and are greater than 50 feet in width, the floor area of the above-ground structures, including garages and all non-habitable areas, shall be limited to 5,500 square feet. But in addition to that, 70% of that gross lot area in excess of 10,000 square feet could be accounted towards floor area. So another example, a 15,000 square foot lot, the maximum gross floor area allowed is 5,500 square feet. Anything in excess of 10,000 square feet, 70% of that calculation will add an additional 3,500 square feet. And this would allow a development of a multifamily building of approximately 9,000 square feet. Basically, what we end up doing is reaching, based on lot size, an average of around 13 units per acre. So that was the directive that came from the general plan, and very minor changes, adding that one section into Chapter 17.28.060. So the alternatives before the council tonight are to introduce and approve for first reading by title only and waive further reading, Ordinance 1377, or amend that code as directed by City Council. Or council can also direct staff to modify Ordinance 1377 for further consideration by council. The staff recommendation is alternative number 1, that the City Council introduce and approve for first reading by title only and waive further reading Ordinance 1377. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Questions?
I don't have any.
It's pretty straightforward.
Well, it's been, the discussion on this started long ago with the general plan. Those figures, it's pretty well vetted at this point, I think.
I think we're good. Thank you.
I am impressed that it came back so soon.
Well, as I mentioned, the Planning Commission does have a subcommittee. We've met on at least 4 occasions currently to go through the rest of the code. So we're going to make very significant changes. So that should be coming to the Planning Commission, I would say, in probably the next month or so, and then eventually will come before the council for adoption.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez.
And this is a public hearing, Mr. Mayor?
That's correct. So we need to have we have a public hearing open right now, right?
You have to say that.
Okay, we're hereby opening this as a public hearing. Sorry about that. And we'll open it to public comment.
Good evening, Mayor Goss and council members. I'm Barry Gold, 441 Ramona Avenue. I just want to take this opportunity to commend the Planning Commission again, excuse me, which I've done on other occasions every time they send you recommendations. As a result of your request for those recommendations, they do a very good, thorough, comprehensive job. And I don't want to miss any opportunity to commend our very hardworking and loyal, dedicated Planning Commission. Thank you.
Other comments? Okay, hearing none, I'll bring it back to the council.
I say I'm good with it. I think just as Director Gonzalez said, it kind of implements that 13 dwelling units per acre, which I think for many years now has been sort of the de facto standard for Sierra Madre, so I think it's good and appropriate.
I'll move for approval.
I'll second it.
Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. And now we move on to item number 4, consideration of reappointment of commissioners and board members.
Very quickly, because this is a very short appointment process. The city council's, the municipal code specifies the terms of all boards and commissions expires June 30th. Annually, staff brings a report to the council of commissioners who have completed a first term, are interested in continuing on to their second term on that particular commission, and for formal direction from the council to reappoint those commissioners. At this time, there's only one commissioner who's interested in reappointment and is eligible for a second term, and that would be Manish Desai on the Planning Commission. We do have one commissioner who, on the Planning Commission, who is eligible for a second term, but is not seeking reappointment, so that would be Planning Commissioner Ken Goldstein. There is an opening on the Planning Commission, which we are currently accepting applications for. I believe we have 3, so this will be coming forward to you in the near future to make that appointment. We do have a number of commissioners who have concluded their terms and are not eligible for reappointment at this time. They can apply for other commissions, should they be interested in, but it does create vacancies on these commissions. Pat Alcorn on the Community Services Commission has completed her terms, Amy Putnam on the Senior Commission, Dorothy Jernasek on the Senior Commission, and Glenn Putnam on the Library Board of Trustees. So at this point, the only commissioner that would be eligible for reappointment by the council would be Manish Desai to the Planning Commission, should that be the council's desire. That concludes my staff report.
Any questions? Hearing none, let's open it for public comment. Okay, let's bring it back to the council. What's your pleasure?
I move that we reappoint Manish Desai to the Planning Commission.
Second?
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
I'd also just like to thank those that are leaving.
Yes.
Pat Alcorn, Amy Putnam, Dorothy Jernasek, and Glenn Putnam, and Ken Goldstein.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Great job
Agreed.
over the years, and I'm disappointed that Ken is not reapplying, but I understand it's quite a commitment.
And finally, potential Los Angeles County Park funding measure in 2016.
Assistant City Manager Cox has this staff presentation.
Good evening. The Los Angeles County Regional Parks and Open Space District is proposing that the LA County Board of Supervisors place a bond measure on the November 2016 ballots. And this bond measure would continue funding park and recreation projects throughout Los Angeles County. It would be a replacement for 2 previous assessments. One was in 1992 and the other was in 1996. And the city has benefited from both of these measures. We have built the second story on the community center, the youth activity center. We did the renovations of the Hart Park House, of the Sierra Madre room. We bought a number of acres of open space in our mountains and have protected those as open space in perpetuity. So these have been grants that we have received. Most recently, we received funding for the landscape project outside of City Hall and to assist with the middle school field for our youth sports groups. The LA County did put a similar measure on the ballot 2 years ago. It failed, but not by much. It's a 2/3 vote, and it got around 60% of the vote without a lot of study, without a lot of proponents encouraging the vote on that particular measure. After that measure failed, the Board of Supervisors and the Open Space District decided to go out and do a needs assessment of all of the LA County cities to find out what our park and recreation needs are. Sierra Madre did participate in this needs assessment. For us, we already had a Parks and Facilities Master Plan, so we were able to use a lot of that data that we already had, but we conducted a couple of other public hearings and opportunities to receive public comments. So in this potential measure, the Board of Supervisors or the LA County Open Space District is going to either propose either a 3% or a 5% assessment per square foot of developed space. We don't know what those final numbers are. They are going back to the Board of Supervisors on July 5th. What we are concerned about, and what the San Gabriel Valley City Managers Task Force has done quite a bit of study on, is actually the return that cities would receive from what our residents will be paying. Essentially, presuming that the Board of Supervisors was to pick the 3 cents per square foot levy, Sierra Madre residents would pay out approximately $257,000, yet Sierra Madre would only be guaranteed to receive about $75,000 back. And there are potentially other grants that we could apply for. There are potential other ways that we could get more money, but the guarantee on that is very low. You have to note at this point in time, the Board of Supervisors has not put anything on the ballot. So what staff is recommending at this point in time is that the City Council approve that the mayor send a letter to the Board of Supervisors encouraging the Board of Supervisors to make sure that the cities are receiving more of a guaranteed return if they place something on the ballot. Then if there is a ballot measure, the Community Services Commission, the City Council can then determine if they like the terms of what are actually in that ballot measure and vote to support or not support it. But at this point in time, staff is looking or recommending that the City Council encourage the Board of Supervisors to provide more of a return back if they are going to place such a measure on the ballot. The Community Services Commission did review this item. Their recommendation was to oppose any ballot measure, especially in light of the recent UUT, that it was just, the timing was wrong for Sierra Madreans to vote on another property or on a property tax assessment. So again, our recommendation is that the City Council authorize the mayor to send a letter to the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors encouraging changes to the proposed funding measures. Again, the Board of Supervisors is scheduled to meet on July 5th to determine whether or not they are going to put something, and if they are, what they are going to put on the ballot. With that, I would answer any questions you might have.
I would like to address the community services concerns. So their recommendation is just to oppose, for us not to go with this letter because they just oppose the whole thing.
Correct.
Which I can understand, but if we don't at least try to get a better result or revenue, right? In the event that everybody else in the county approves it and passes it, then we're still getting this shortchanged, right?
Correct, which is
So-
why staff has, in this case,
Right.
an alternate recommendation.
So if we go forward with this letter and they go forward with the proposal and put it on the ballot, then that would be a time where if we wanted to say, hey, we just oppose it.
Correct.
But we're just kind of setting ourselves up just in case it does pass.
Correct.
Any other questions? It's open to public comment then. It's getting late.
Public comment.
Yes. Public comment, please.
Good evening again, Mayor Koss and council members. Barry Gold. I would recommend not to send a letter. I would recommend to tell everybody in Sierra Madre if the county puts a something on the ballot to vote against it, and here are the reasons why. We are going to probably ask our citizens to pass some sort of parcel or other tax in 2018 to finance the increased costs that I'm sure the police department and the fire department and all our other services will end up costing. We knew when the UUT was put on the ballot, just passed, that it was going to get us through 2 years, and we're going to have to ask for more money then. If we ask the citizens now to put up $250 some odd thousand, it wouldn't matter to me if we got 100% of it back. It's not going to where we need it. Of course, we're going to get 29 or a little bit more maybe. We have about $20 million worth in bond debt we have to pay off. We're going to need to get revenues for that. We have about $40 million worth of water pipes to replace. We're going to need to ask everybody to come up with money for that. And we're going to need more money just to fund the general fund expenses in a couple of years. So to ask everybody to now come up with another $250,000, which we don't know what part of it we're getting or what will happen to it at all, is not a good idea. Thank you.
Other public comment? Okay, bring it back to council.
I'm actually in support of this letter. I think, you know, if it gets to the ballot, there'll be another question. We're looking in November, there might be up to 30 different ballot measures there. When we spoke to Assemblyman Holden, there is also going to be expected a state parks bond that will be on there. There's going to be a whole array of things. But I think when you're looking, especially at a county bill or a county measure, that we're looking at 16 million people in the county that will be voting on it. I think we need to prepare ourselves if it were to pass, and this would be a first step at it. When we get to that point, if we're going to say that we're not in support of the ballot measure, I mean, we can have that discussion, but in this preliminary work, I think it should be done. And I'm glad Assistant City Manager Cox, you did say it's going to the entire supervisors, because this letter doesn't have the CCs. I just want to make sure that's part of it, that it goes to all 5 supervisors, and I am in support of the letter as written with the CC added on there.
I'm in support of the letter. And to Mr. Gold's point, we can't opt out. There's no opt-out clause. So, you know, we have no choice but to be part of the mix, and we can all vote individually or recommend that we don't approve this, but to really set us up in a good position in the event that it does pass, I would like to see us get as much as we can for that.
Agreed.
I completely concur with everything I've heard. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the approval to send the letter out to the supervisors as written.
I'll second it.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Do we have any other items for new business, future meetings? Hearing none. Is there a motion for adjournment?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned, folks.
Not bad for a